In the quiet depths of China's forgotten valleys, something ancient stirs beneath the earth. It's older than the Great Wall, and its story runs deeper than any written record. For thousands of years, secrets have been etched into jade, sealed in imperial tombs, and echoed through the halls of abandoned temples. They whisper of mysterious machines beyond modern understanding, of pyramids older than history itself, and emperors who may have blurred the line between myth and something far more unsettling. How did ancient artisans achieve such microscopic precision? Why do age-old texts describe flying dragons, not as metaphors, but as witnessed events? And what lies behind sealed chambers deemed too dangerous to open, even today? This isn't just the past. It's a trail of riddles we were never supposed to solve. So take a breath and follow us into the hidden corners of one of Earth's oldest civilizations, where truth and legend intertwine, and every stone may conceal a forgotten truth. Beneath a mound of earth in the heart of Shanxi province lies one of the most enigmatic structures in all of China, an unassuming rise in the landscape known as Mount Li. To the casual eye, it appears to be nothing more than a hill, shaped by time and erosion. But beneath its quiet surface, sealed for over 2,000 years, rests the mausoleum of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The man who unified a fractured land, built the first Great Wall, and whose ambition extended beyond death itself. Discovered in the 1970s, the site has since yielded one of the most breathtaking finds in archaeological history: the Terracotta Army. Thousands of life-sized soldiers, each with distinct facial features, armor, and weapons, frozen in silence as they stand guard in orderly ranks. Horses, chariots, archers, all sculpted with uncanny realism, guard the path to something far more elusive: the central tomb chamber of the emperor himself. That chamber, however, remains untouched. No archaeologist has ever entered it. No probe has pierced its sealed interior. The Chinese government, citing concerns over preservation and safety, has declined all excavation efforts of the core burial mound. And so it stands, sealed in mystery, a monument to power and secrecy. What lies inside? Ancient records from the historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's death, provide tantalizing clues. He describes a vast underground palace, with ceilings studded with pearls to mimic the stars, and rivers of flowing mercury representing the Yangtze, Yellow, and other great waterways of China. The tomb, he claims, was designed to be an eternal empire, a mirror of the world above, meant to house Qin Shi Huang in immortal splendor. Modern science has given us reason to believe some of these claims may not be pure myth. Soil samples taken around the burial mound have revealed unusually high levels of mercury, far beyond what would be expected from natural sources. Could there truly be liquid mercury coursing through artificial rivers beneath the earth? And if so, was it simply symbolic, or does it serve some forgotten function? The mystery deepens when we consider the scale. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected complex subterranean structures beneath the mound: chambers, walls, possibly even staircases and hidden corridors. Some researchers believe the entire complex may be several times larger than initially thought, containing rooms yet to be mapped, their contents unknown. There are stories, whispers on the edge of accepted history, that suggest the tomb may hold more than riches. Some fringe theories, though unproven, speak of strange artifacts buried alongside the emperor, devices of unknown purpose, maps of stars not visible to the naked eye, even references in obscure texts to mechanical traps set to protect the emperor's rest. What could these traps be? Mere symbolic deterrents? Or something more advanced than ancient engineering should allow? The fear of destroying what cannot be replaced looms large. If the chamber is opened, can it be done without compromising its contents? The terracotta army, despite its grandeur, was discovered in damaged fragments and had to be painstakingly reconstructed. Would the same fate await whatever lies inside the tomb? Perhaps that is why, even now, the heart of the mausoleum remains untouched, a deliberate choice to preserve the enigma, at least for now. It is an act of restraint rare in archaeology, where the pressure to unveil often outweighs the patience to wait. But questions persist. Why build such an elaborate underground world only to hide it forever? Was it truly for the emperor's soul, as tradition claims? Or was it to conceal something else, something that was never meant to be seen again? As the earth settles undisturbed, and the mercury vapors, if they exist, continue to drift in darkness, the secrets of Qin Shi Huang remain beyond our grasp. We are left only with speculation, fragments of text, and the chilling knowledge that the most powerful man in ancient China may still lie in state beneath our feet, untouched, unobserved, and possibly not alone. Perhaps one day, when technology allows us to peer safely inside without risk, the silence will be broken. Until then, the tomb waits, and so do we. What secrets sleep behind the walls of earth and stone? And what price must we pay to uncover them? Just beyond the outskirts of Xi'an, beneath a veil of dusty red soil, rows upon rows of silent figures stand in eternal formation. Their faces are calm, their posture resolute. Time has not softened their presence, nor diminished the eerie sense of purpose they radiate. These are not mere statues, they are guardians. Crafted over 2,000 years ago, the terracotta army remains one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in human history. And yet, for all their grandeur, we still do not fully understand why they were made, or how. The year was 1974. Local farmers, digging a well during a period of drought, struck upon what they believed to be pottery fragments. What emerged over the following months would stun the world. A vast subterranean complex filled with life-sized warriors, horses, archers, and chariots. Each sculpted in clay, each distinct, as if modeled after real people, frozen in the act of marching, guarding, waiting. They were created, historians agree, to protect the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. But the scale of the army defies comprehension. Over 8,000 soldiers have been uncovered across 3 main pits, with estimates suggesting thousands more remain hidden. Their armor and hairstyles vary by rank and region, suggesting an attention to realism far beyond what funerary art typically requires. Some believe these figures were modeled after actual members of the imperial army. Others suggest they may represent something more symbolic, or something still unknown. How are they made? Archaeological evidence shows that artisans used modular construction techniques, torsos, legs, and arms cast from molds and then customized with clay to give each soldier a unique identity. This level of mass production, paired with individual artistry, was unprecedented for its time. Did this reflect the emperor's obsession with control? Or could it indicate a deeper system of organization, perhaps one inherited from an earlier, undocumented civilization? Intriguingly, no written records have been found that describe the army's creation. A project of this magnitude, requiring tens of thousands of workers, vast logistical coordination, and decades of effort, left behind no contemporary accounts. Why? Some historians speculate that secrecy was paramount. After all, the emperor was consumed with the idea of immortality. Could it be that the army was meant to serve him not just in the afterlife, but to guard something more sacred, more dangerous? If so, what? There are those who believe the terracotta army was not simply a funerary offering, but a kind of encoded message, a map, a warning. Certain alignments within the pits have been shown to mirror constellations. Others note that the positioning of the warriors may correspond to known military strategies from ancient Chinese warfare manuals. Is it possible that Qin Shi Huang intended these figures to serve as a model for something far greater? A cosmic battlefield, perhaps, or a representation of divine order? The materials used also raise questions. The warriors once bore weapons, bronze swords, spears, and arrowheads, many of which were found to be remarkably well preserved. Some blades still glint, resistant to corrosion, despite being buried for over 2 millennia. This led researchers to wonder, were these weapons coated with a protective layer far ahead of their time? Early theories suggested the presence of chromium, a modern anti-rust coating, but later studies cast doubt on that. Still, the question lingers. How did such technology exist in the 3rd century BCE? Then there is the question of their faces. Each warrior has a unique expression, some serene, others stern. Cheekbones, chins, eyelids, all vary in subtle ways. Could this be evidence that real individuals were used as models? Or does it reflect an ancient understanding of identity, individuality, and memory? Some even speculate these were more than mere sculptures, that they were intended to house spirits or serve as vessels in rituals now long forgotten. And what of the unexcavated pits? Ground-penetrating radar and remote imaging suggest additional vaults still lie beneath the soil, undisturbed. What might they contain? More soldiers? Exotic beasts sculpted in stone? Strange artifacts with no known function? Or perhaps a secret chamber, a command center for this silent army, lost to time? There are legends, persistent and strange, that hint at deeper truths. Stories of otherworldly beings visiting ancient emperors, teaching them how to conquer not just lands, but death itself. These tales were dismissed for centuries as folklore. Yet, as our understanding of ancient engineering deepens, and as anomalies continue to emerge from the soil, the line between myth and possibility begins to blur. We do not know if the terracotta army was built as a symbol of power, a spiritual force, or a practical protection against forces seen and unseen. We do not know if its creation was born purely of ambition or of fear. But as the quiet faces of clay stare across the centuries, as their shadows stretch across stone corridors untouched by sunlight, we are left to wonder, what were they guarding? And who, or what, were they waiting for? Tucked away in the fertile plains of Sichuan province, far from the political heart of ancient China, lies a place that challenges everything we thought we knew about early Chinese civilization. Beneath the quiet landscape near the city of Guanghan, archaeologists uncovered something that did not match the familiar story of dynasties and empires. Instead, they found a mystery, buried deep in the earth, wrapped in ash and silence. The remnants of a culture so strange, so visually arresting, that it seemed almost otherworldly. This is Sanxingdui. The first clues emerged by chance in the late 1920s, when a farmer digging an irrigation ditch unearthed fragments of jade and stone. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the scale of the discovery became clear. 2 massive pits were excavated, revealing hundreds of ritual objects, masks, statues, ceremonial blades, and sacred trees, crafted with astonishing skill and made of materials never before seen in this region. The objects were unlike anything found in the rest of ancient China. And the deeper archaeologists dug, the stranger the picture became. The faces. That's what first arrests the eye. Bronze masks with exaggerated features, wide, almond-shaped eyes that protrude impossibly far from the face, rising upward like antennae. Elongated ears, angular jaws. Some wear serene expressions, others seem caught in a silent scream. One statue, towering at nearly 9 feet, depicts a human figure with massive hands extended, as if grasping something invisible. These are not the soft, rounded depictions of the Shang or Zhou dynasties. These figures are sharp, stylized, and haunting. Who made them? And more importantly, why? The Sanxingdui civilization, as it came to be known, has no written records, no tombs of kings, no palaces, no chronicles etched in stone. Yet their craftsmanship, working in bronze, gold, ivory, and jade, is among the finest of the ancient world. Dating back over 3,000 years to roughly 1200 BCE, the site predates many of the more famous Chinese relics. And yet it shows evidence of advanced metallurgy, artistic expression, and religious symbolism that suggest a complex, organized, and deeply spiritual society. But this society is not mentioned in any of the great Chinese historical texts. How could a civilization of this magnitude, capable of casting giant bronze statues and erecting monumental altars, simply disappear from the record? Some scholars have proposed that Sanxingdui was part of the ancient Shu kingdom, later absorbed into Chinese history under different names. Others argue it was an entirely separate cultural sphere, with its own language, mythology, and cosmology, one that existed in parallel to, but apart from, the Central Plains dynasties. Still, many questions remain. Why were the artifacts deliberately buried? The two main pits seem to have been ritual sacrifice sites, filled with broken offerings. Statues snapped at the neck, masks scorched by fire, sacred objects shattered before burial. Was this a religious act, a ceremonial closure of an era? Or was it something darker, an act of desperation, of sudden flight or collapse? And then there are the stranger theories. The alien-like appearance of the Sanxingdui masks has drawn the attention of fringe theorists and alternative historians. Some suggest that the protruding eyes and stylized forms represent beings not of this world. Extraterrestrial visitors, interpreted as gods by the ancient people. Others believe they were representations of spiritual entities or beings seen in altered states of consciousness. Could the masks reflect visions from ritual trances or depictions of divine forms now lost to history? There's also the matter of sudden disappearance. Sometime around 1100 BCE, Sanxingdui vanished. The city was abandoned, its people gone. No signs of war, famine, or natural disaster have been definitively linked to its fall. What force could erase a civilization so completely that its very memory was forgotten for millennia? In recent years, nearby sites such as Jinsha have offered tantalizing hints that the culture may have relocated, evolving into something new. But the connection remains tenuous. The thread is thin. And Sanxingdui, in its original form, remains an anomaly, both a marvel and a riddle. Even now, new excavations are underway. In 2021, a series of new pits were discovered just meters from the original site. And again, strange relics emerged. Golden masks, bronze boxes, silken fabrics preserved in layers of ash. As scientists work to analyze and conserve these treasures, one thing becomes clear. The story of Sanxingdui is far from finished. Was this a forgotten chapter in the human story, or the first page of something else entirely? As we stand before the blank, unblinking eyes of a Sanxingdui mask, as we trace the delicate lines etched into gold and jade, we are reminded of how much we do not know. The past speaks in whispers, and some of its voices come from places we have yet to understand. Hidden beneath the quiet village of Xianbeikun in Zhejiang province lies a world carved entirely by human hands, yet whose origin remains a complete mystery. The Longyu Caves, as they are now known, were discovered not by archaeologists or historians, but by curious villagers in 1992, draining a pond that had been filled for generations. What they found beneath the water was astonishing. A massive, perfectly preserved, hand-hewn chamber, lost to time. But this was only the beginning. Further exploration revealed not one cave, but a sprawling network, at least 24 individual caverns carved into solid sandstone, each with precise symmetry and a striking consistency of design. Towering columns support arched ceilings. Walls slope at perfect angles. Floors are smoothed, and everywhere the same curious pattern covers the surfaces. Long, parallel chisel marks running in uniform lines, as though the entire system had been shaped with deliberate artistry, not mere utility. The sheer scale is staggering. Some chambers reach heights of over 30 meters. The volume of rock removed, an estimated 1 million cubic meters, defies belief. And yet, no tools, no drawings, no written records speak of their construction. No ancient text mentions their builders. No local legend tells the story of their origin. How could such a monumental undertaking have simply disappeared from memory? Carbon dating and stratigraphy offer limited insight, but consensus places the cave's construction sometime before the Qin dynasty, possibly over 2,000 years ago. If this is true, it raises an unsettling question. How did an ancient people, without modern machinery, excavate these caverns so precisely? And for what purpose? Mainstream scholars have offered a range of hypotheses. Some suggest the caves were quarries, abandoned mid-use. But this fails to explain the intricate layout, the deliberate design choices, the fact that not a single cave appears unfinished. Others propose storage facilities or secret meeting halls. Yet none of these ideas account for the enormity of the labor or the complete absence of debris. Where did the excavated stone go? Why are there no signs of transportation or repurposing in the surrounding area? Equally puzzling is the silence of history. The nearby regions are rich with ancient Chinese records, dynastic annals, village chronicles, regional histories. These documents span centuries and mention everything from harvest yields to celestial omens. Yet they say nothing about the construction of the Longyu caves. The deeper one looks, the stranger it becomes. Each cave is separate, yet their layouts mirror one another. Support pillars are placed at regular intervals, suggesting not only architectural foresight, but mathematical planning. The acoustic properties of the chambers hint at intentional design for sound resonance. Were they used for rituals, for ceremonies, for meditation or containment? And then there are the symbols. Though the caves are largely devoid of decoration, a few faint engravings, simple figures, birds, and mysterious markings suggest some form of symbolic or ceremonial meaning. But they offer no clear translation. Could they have been part of a forgotten spiritual tradition, now lost to time? Or do they reflect the language of a culture so far removed from what we know that its traces have been misread or entirely missed? Speculative theories have inevitably emerged. Some point to a highly advanced ancient civilization with capabilities that rival modern engineering. Others propose even more controversial ideas, that the caves were designed with astronomical alignments or to mimic something seen from above. A few go so far as to suggest extraterrestrial influence, drawn to the uniformity and seeming inexplicability of the work. But perhaps the most haunting theory is the simplest, that we have no idea what we're looking at. What if the Longyu caves were not abandoned, but completed? What if their purpose, whatever it was fulfilled, and the reason we cannot understand them is that we are asking the wrong questions? Their silence is deafening. No soot marks stain the ceilings. No human remains lie in rest. No tools, no scripts, no altars. Only space, empty, deliberate space, shaped with care and left untouched for millennia. To stand inside one of these caverns is to step into the unknown. The walls feel heavy with intent. The symmetry creates a sense of order, but the purpose remains elusive. There is beauty in their design, and something more. a quiet suggestion that these halls once meant something profound. So we are left to wonder, who carved them? What drove them to such effort? What did they know that we have forgotten? And if the answers lie deeper beneath the earth, how long must we wait to uncover what else remains hidden? High in the mist-covered mountains of the Bayanhar Range, on the border between China and Tibet, lies a landscape both remote and rugged, where the wind whispers across desolate plateaus and time seems suspended in stone. It is here, according to a story that has endured for decades, that a discovery was made. A discovery so unusual, so out of place, that it continues to divide opinion and provoke wonder. The Dropa stones. Described as thin, circular discs, each about 30 centimeters in diameter, with a perfectly round hole at the center. The stones were said to have been unearthed in a series of ancient burial caves by a Chinese archaeological team in the 1930s. Their surfaces, weathered by time, were not smooth. Instead, they bore a strange feature, a continuous spiral groove winding from the edge to the center, almost like the grooves of a vinyl record. But this was no music etched into the stone. It was writing, or so the story goes. What followed was a decades-long mystery that blurred the line between archaeology and legend. According to reports, a Chinese professor named Nui from the Beijing Academy of Ancient Studies deciphered the spiral inscriptions in the 1960s. The translation, if true, would be nothing short of extraordinary. The stones allegedly told the tale of a spacecraft that crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago, carrying a group of beings called the Dropa, small, fragile humanoids with large heads and slight frames. Unable to return to their home planet, they were forced to adapt to life on Earth, eventually making peace with the local inhabitants and disappearing into history. The implications were staggering. Could these stones be the first recorded account of extraterrestrial contact? Were the Dropa real? A lost people from beyond the stars, immortalized in stone? But mainstream scholars were, and remain, skeptical. No physical Dropa stones exist in any museum collection today. There is no photographic evidence from the original 1930s dig, and the institutions and individuals associated with the discovery are themselves cloaked in uncertainty. Professor Nui, the man credited with the translation, appears in no academic records outside of Dropa-related accounts. Some researchers suggest he never existed at all. Others claim that Chinese authorities suppressed the information for fear of international ridicule. Then again, there are peculiarities that keep the legend alive. Travelers to the region have documented oral traditions among local tribes, stories of star visitors who came from the skies in a time before memory. Beings who were different from humans, but not feared. Some say these myths align curiously with the Dropa account. Others point to the skeletal remains allegedly found in the caves, unusually small, with oversized craniums, though none of these remains were ever publicly verified. And what of the stones themselves? Several individuals have claimed to have seen them over the years, some in private collections, others in obscure museums before they quietly vanished from public view. In the 1970s, a Soviet research team reportedly analyzed similar stone discs and found that they emitted a faint electrical charge when placed under certain frequencies. But the documentation of these tests has long since disappeared, and the team's findings were never published in any peer-reviewed journal. Could the Dropa stones have been real, and then quietly erased from the scientific record? Or were they simply the product of Cold War-era intrigue, born from a blend of ancient myths, archaeological ambition, and the rising global fascination with UFO phenomena? There are those who believe the entire story was fabricated, an elaborate hoax, perhaps invented by an imaginative journalist, or an opportunistic author, looking to blend science fiction with archaeology. And yet, even this explanation raises questions. Why did the story endure for so long? Why do new claims, even now, continue to surface? People reporting lost discs, forgotten caves, untranslated symbols etched into stone. The absence of concrete proof does not confirm fiction, nor does it confirm truth. It leaves us in a suspended state, where possibility lingers, but certainty never arrives. There is something undeniably compelling about the image of the Dropa stones. The quiet, ancient mountain cave, the delicate spiral marks, the whispered story of beings from another world stranded among us. Whether metaphor or memory, invention or inheritance, the tale taps into something deep, a longing to understand where we come from and whether we are truly alone. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the Dropa stones is not whether they are real, but why we keep looking for them. What draws us to this story, despite its contradictions? And if the stones ever surface again, will we recognize them for what they truly are? Long before China became a unified empire, before the Great Wall rose along its northern frontier, and before the terracotta armies stood sentinel in Shanxi soil, there were the 9 tripod cauldrons, massive bronze vessels that once embodied the very soul of imperial authority. Known as the Juding, these cauldrons were said to be cast by Yu the Great, founder of the Xia dynasty, more than 4,000 years ago. And though their physical form has long vanished from history, their symbolic power endures, mysterious, sacred, and shrouded in silence. According to ancient texts, each cauldron was forged from bronze collected as tribute from the 9 provinces of early China. They were immense, heavy, and elaborately decorated with the images of mythical beasts and sacred emblems, markings said to represent the natural forces, geography, and divine spirits of the land. Their creation was not merely ceremonial, it was cosmological. The Juding were believed to anchor the mandate of heaven, the invisible force that granted emperors their legitimacy. To possess them was to possess the right to rule. For centuries, the cauldrons resided in the imperial capital, first in the city of Yangcheng, then moved by succeeding dynasties to other political centers. The Zhou, Qin, Han, and beyond all venerated the cauldrons as more than relics. They were living symbols of continuity and divine favor, said to protect the realm and bless the sovereign with authority. And then, they disappeared. No one knows exactly when. The historical record grows increasingly vague after the fall of the Qin and Han dynasties. Some accounts suggest that the cauldrons sank into the Sea River during a flood. Others claim they were seized by rival warlords or melted down during times of civil unrest. Some stories say they were deliberately hidden to protect them from falling into enemy hands. And a few, whispered quietly, speak of something stranger still, that the cauldrons were not entirely of this world to begin with. How could objects of such importance, so intricately documented in early annals and court ritual, simply vanish? Modern historians have searched in vain for archaeological traces. Despite extensive excavations in former capitals like Luoyang, Chang'an, and Kaifeng, no definitive remains of the Juding have been uncovered. Their enormous weight, some records claim each weighed several tons, should have left signs, foundation pits, broken fragments, storage platforms. Yet, there is nothing. Could they have been deliberately destroyed? During the warring periods that tore ancient China apart, many symbols of previous regimes were targeted and erased. But even in chaos, such destruction would have been recorded, or at least rumored. The absence of detail is striking, almost as if the disappearance was meant to be forgotten. And still, their legend lives on. In Taoist and Confucian texts, the cauldrons are spoken of as talismans of balance and harmony. In later imperial times, emperors would reference them in rituals and poems, lamenting their absence, seeking to summon their spirit. Even today, The phrase asking about the cauldrons, in Chinese, implies questioning the legitimacy of one's rule, a reminder of how deeply they remain embedded in cultural memory. Some fringe theorists have taken the mystery further. They point to the mystical qualities attributed to the cauldrons in ancient descriptions, that they could control the weather, repel evil spirits, or resonate with celestial harmonics. Were these mere metaphors? Or did the Juding possess properties beyond our current understanding of metallurgy and symbolism? One theory suggests the cauldrons were not merely ceremonial objects, but ancient technological devices, perhaps designed to harness electromagnetic energy or record data in some unknown format. Their geometric symmetry, paired with their sacred positioning across the land's provinces, has even led to speculative comparisons with grid-based energy systems or geomantic alignments. Others see parallels with artifacts in global mythology, objects of power that vanish from history, only to reappear in times of need. The Ark of the Covenant, the Spear of Destiny. Could the Juding belong to this category? Objects not lost, but hidden? A few tales even hint at guardians, secretive lineages tasked with protecting the cauldrons from those who would misuse their power. These stories are scarce, half-remembered, and lacking in substantiation. But they persist in rural folklore, especially in regions once considered sacred ground. And so, the Juding remain where they have always been, suspended between legend and reality, between bronze and myth. Were they melted down in a forgotten war, buried beneath river silt and centuries of dynastic dust, hidden in a mountain chamber yet to be uncovered? Or were they never physical objects in the way we imagine, perhaps instead existing as metaphysical constructs, vessels of meaning rather than matter? The silence of the cauldrons speaks louder than any proclamation. And in that silence, we find the same question asked across generations. What became of the 9 tripod cauldrons, those ancient bearers of heaven's mandate? And if they still exist, waiting in shadow, what forgotten truth might they yet reveal? Rising from the mist along the banks of the Yangtze River, where the waters wind through the rugged landscapes of Chongqing, stands a city unlike any other in China. Perched on the slopes of Ming Mountain, Fengdu is known not for the lives it once held, but for the dead it still welcomes. With weather-worn statues of demons, ornate temples to underworld deities, and gateways carved with cryptic inscriptions, Fengdu has long been called the Ghost City, a place where, according to legend, the boundary between the living and the afterlife grows thin. The origins of Fengdu reach back nearly 2,000 years to the Han Dynasty, when it first became associated with Taoist practices surrounding death and judgment. Over the centuries, it grew into a complex spiritual landscape, a blend of Taoist, Buddhist, and folk traditions, all centered on a single idea: that this mountain town is the gateway to Diyu, the Chinese underworld. As you ascend its steep paths, you pass through a sequence of symbolic thresholds. The first is the Gate of Hell, where the souls of the dead are said to gather. Beyond it lies the Bridge of Helplessness, a narrow stone span where spirits are judged by underworld officials. Here, a soul's balance of good and evil is tested. The innocent cross safely, the guilty fall. Further up, you arrive at the Palace of the King of Hell. Intricate carvings depict grotesque tortures, flaming pits, and monstrous wardens. Statues of Yama, the ruler of the underworld, tower above the visitors. Each hall, each corridor, is a vision of the afterlife meant to instruct, to warn, and perhaps, to prepare. But is this merely myth made visible? A physical allegory meant to scare the living into moral obedience? Or is there something older, deeper, hidden beneath the theatrics of religious symbolism? The architecture of Fengdu is remarkably unique. The entire city is laid out according to precise geomantic principles, alignments of mountain, river, and structure, believed to channel energy between worlds. Some researchers have noted that these spatial arrangements mirror diagrams found in ancient funerary texts, including the classic of mountains and seas, which maps the geography of mythological realms. Is it possible that Fengdu was not just inspired by visions of the underworld, but modeled upon them? Local legends speak of two reclusive sages, Yin Chengsheng and Wang Fengping, who lived on the mountain during the Eastern Han Dynasty. It's said that they practiced esoteric Taoist alchemy, seeking immortality, and eventually became deified as underworld judges. Their names, when combined, form the word Yinwang, meaning king of the underworld. Did these historical figures become myth over time? Or were they part of a tradition far older, one that predates organized religion? A ritual knowledge passed down from a forgotten era. The city's atmosphere is heavy with contradiction. It is both a place of pilgrimage and of fear, of playful displays and ominous warnings. Visitors pass through gates shaped like demon mouths, walk among statues frozen in contorted expressions of suffering, and yet also encounter shrines lit by lanterns, surrounded by the scent of incense and soft chanting. The experience is theatrical, but it doesn't feel artificial. It feels ancient. And then there is the question of what lies below. Parts of the original ghost city were submerged beneath the rising waters of the Yangtze after the construction of the Three Gorges Dam. Much of Fengdu was relocated to higher ground, but the older structures, the lower levels, now sit beneath the surface, inaccessible and unseen. What might have been lost there? What forgotten shrines, sealed chambers, or inscriptions were drowned before they could be studied? Some speculate that the original site may have contained records or relics dating to pre-Han periods, perhaps even to times before the written word. The connection between death and mountains is deeply rooted in Chinese cosmology. Mountains were seen as vertical bridges, ascending into the divine, descending into the netherworld. Could Fengdu have been built atop such a nexus point? Not just symbolically, but physically. And what are we to make of the persistent rumors, passed down through generations, of strange phenomena around the mountain? Reports of ghostly lights, voices heard in the fog, of people who ascend the slopes alone and return, changed. Local elders, when asked, often speak in riddles. There are places, one reportedly said, where the dead are closer than the living. Of course, many of these stories can be explained as folklore, amplified by time and retelling. But the consistency of the imagery, the symbolism shared across regions and centuries, is difficult to dismiss entirely. Why does so much of Fengdu's mythology resonate so closely with the fears and hopes of so many cultures? Judgment, passage, rebirth? Is this the product of cultural evolution, or a reflection of something universal, something rooted in experience rather than belief? In the end, Fengdu remains what it has always been: a threshold, a place where the myths of the afterlife are brought into the daylight, made stone, made fire, made prayer. But whether these myths are just echoes of the human psyche, or blueprints of a realm just beyond our reach, is a mystery that has yet to reveal itself. In a dusty storeroom in Anyang, beneath layers of time and silence, lie fragments of bone and shell, delicate, cracked, and inscribed with lines so ancient they barely resemble writing. These are the oracle bones of the Shang dynasty, some of the earliest known evidence of Chinese script, and perhaps the oldest recorded attempt to communicate with the unseen world. They are relics of a forgotten dialogue, between king and cosmos, between question and fire, between human fear and divine answer. Made from the shoulder blades of oxen or the plastrons of turtles, the bones were ritually prepared and carefully heated, until hairline fractures appeared on their surface. Priests, shamans perhaps, then interpreted the patterns, reading them as signs from ancestors or spirits. Later, scribes carved the questions into the bone, preserving not just the answers received, but the very hopes and uncertainties of a civilization over 3,000 years old. Many of these inscriptions are clear. They ask about war, harvests, childbirth, and illness. They seek omens, request guidance, offer gratitude. And yet, not all of them can be read. Scattered among the deciphered glyphs are symbols that defy translation, isolated characters, rare variants, and entire segments whose meanings remain unknown. These are the undeciphered scripts of the oracle bones, and they hold secrets that even modern scholars have yet to unlock. Why were some characters used only once, never to appear again? Do they represent forgotten words, extinct dialects, or esoteric ritual codes meant only for priestly eyes? Could they belong to an older language, absorbed and overwritten by Shang orthography? Or do they encode concepts not easily translatable into modern terms, names of spirits, ancient mathematical formulae, or philosophical constructs lost to time? The mystery deepens when one considers the context in which these bones were used. This was not writing for record-keeping or poetry. It was sacred. Each inscription was an act of divination, intended not for human memory, but for spiritual clarity. And yet someone took the time to preserve the questions, to carve them, line by line, into brittle bone and shell, as if they knew they would one day be read again. But who exactly were the readers? Most known oracle bones come from the late Shang capital of Yin, near modern-day Anyang, where tens of thousands of examples have been excavated. The language etched into them, often referred to as Jiaguwen, is the direct ancestor of modern Chinese script. And yet, even after decades of study, many characters remain ambiguous. Some have no known cognates. Others bear strange combinations of familiar elements, arranged in patterns that defy established grammar. This has led to a number of competing theories. Mainstream linguists suggest that these indecipherable characters reflect either scribal experimentation or forgotten vocabulary, normal features of a living language in its early stages. But other researchers point out that certain characters appear only in divinations related to celestial or metaphysical topics. Eclipses, comets, dreams, sacrifices. Could these symbols represent specialized ritual knowledge? Were they the secret script of the elite, meant to obscure meaning from common eyes? Then there are more speculative views. Some have proposed that the undeciphered characters were never meant to be read in a traditional sense, that they might be sigils designed to hold symbolic or magical force, like mantras or talismans. Others have gone further, suggesting that the patterns may encode nonverbal information, perhaps musical tones or numeric sequences tied to ancient cosmology. And still others wonder, were these bones part of something even larger? The Shang people believed in a vast spiritual bureaucracy, an ordered realm of ancestors, nature gods, and cosmic regulators. The oracle bones, in this view, are less about language and more about access, keys to a metaphysical system. Some characters might correspond not to spoken words, but to spiritual entities, their names now lost, their functions now forgotten. Could the undeciphered symbols be invocations, meant to summon, to appease, or to warn? Curiously, oracle bone script was not a one-time phenomenon. Its use spanned generations, and similar practices have been noted as far afield as Tibet, Japan, and even Neolithic Europe. Could there have been a broader tradition of bone-based divination, one that predated writing itself, a kind of proto-script that evolved separately before converging with recorded history? The undeciphered characters remain silent, and yet, their presence continues to haunt the academic world. Each new fragment uncovered offers a possibility that one day a pattern will emerge, a forgotten word will resurface, a link will be made. But for now, the symbols linger just beyond reach, teasing us with the knowledge that we are reading only part of a message, hearing only half of a conversation. As we stare into the faint grooves carved by an unknown hand more than 3 millennia ago, we are reminded of something humbling. That for all our knowledge, all our machines, all our methods, there are still languages we cannot understand. And perhaps the bones are not just asking ancient questions, but waiting, patiently, for us to learn how to listen. Beneath the earth in the hills of Changsha, in Hunan province, lies a tomb that has perplexed scientists, historians, and spiritual thinkers alike. Discovered in the early 1970s during the construction of an air raid shelter, the site was nothing short of a time capsule, sealed and undisturbed for over 2 millennia. Inside, archaeologists uncovered a burial so elaborate, so well preserved, that it seemed as if the ancient past had only just taken its final breath. This was Unwinding, and within its innermost chamber, wrapped in layer upon layer of lacquered coffins and silken shrouds, rested the body of Lady Dai. Sanxingdui, Marquise of Dai, wife of the Han Dynasty nobleman Li Kung, died over 2,100 years ago. And yet, when her tomb was opened, her body appeared eerily lifelike. Her skin was still soft, her veins still red. Internal organs were intact, and her hair remained in place. Even the blood in her veins was found to be type A. The astonishment was immediate, and so was the mystery. How could a body remain so perfectly preserved for more than 2,000 years without the aid of modern embalming? What techniques were used, and who possessed this knowledge in an era when even the Romans were only beginning to refine the basics of anatomy? Her body had been placed within a nested sequence of coffins, each meticulously painted and sealed with layers of clay and charcoal. The environment inside the tomb was oxygen-deprived, sealed so tightly that bacteria could not survive. But that alone could not explain the extraordinary state of preservation. Most perplexing of all was the discovery of a mysterious liquid surrounding her corpse. Pale yellow in color, slightly acidic in composition, it did not match any known embalming fluids, ancient or modern. Its precise formula remains unidentified to this day. Was it a form of protochemical preservation, passed down through generations and then lost to time? Or was it an accidental byproduct of the tomb's construction, an alchemical coincidence that we still cannot replicate? Beyond the body itself, the contents of the tomb tell a story rich in symbolism and cosmological thought. Dozens of lacquered boxes were filled with food offerings, grains, fruits, meats, many still bearing their original color and texture. Her wardrobe, comprising more than 100 silk garments, was woven with exquisite detail, some of the finest textile work ever recovered from the Han period. There were cosmetics, musical instruments, and even a complete medical kit. And then there was the silk banner, found laid atop the innermost coffin, an object of unmatched artistry and spiritual significance. The banner, nearly 2 meters in length, depicts a journey from the world of the living to the afterlife. At the bottom, mourners gather around Lady Dai's deathbed. In the middle, celestial beings and divine animals guide her soul upward. At the top, she is welcomed into a heavenly realm, presided over by abstract cosmic forces. The composition is as much a cosmological map as it is a religious icon, a visual theology of death and rebirth. What did Lady Dai believe about the afterlife? Did she anticipate being preserved? Was the tomb meant as a literal gateway to a spiritual realm, with the body serving as a vessel for resurrection or cosmic transformation? And more importantly, who designed it? No single text from the Han era describes such a procedure in full. And while the elite of the time did practice elaborate burial rituals, none come close to the precision and mystery of Unwinding. Were these customs part of a short-lived spiritual movement, a lost sect? Or was this tomb the work of an elite class of mortuary specialists, masters of forgotten knowledge, combining science, ritual, and belief in ways that blur the lines between medicine and magic? Some have even speculated that Lady Di's preservation may have served a more arcane purpose, that her body was not meant merely to endure, but to remain intact for some ceremonial function in the far future. Could this preservation have been a form of spiritual insurance, keeping her ready for a role in some celestial cycle yet to unfold? More fringe theories have emerged, of course. Some suggest the tomb builders may have had access to ancient chemistry, more advanced than we understand. Others point to possible connections with early Taoist alchemy, which aimed to transcend death through both physical and spiritual transformation. And a few, looking at the impossibility of her condition, even whisper about lost knowledge from civilizations far older than China itself. But the tomb does not speak. It offers no clear answers. Today, Lady Di's body rests in a climate-controlled display, and the objects from her tomb are studied by experts around the world. Yet despite decades of analysis, we are no closer to fully understanding how or why she was preserved so perfectly. The formula remains unreplicated, the rituals unrecorded, the knowledge seemingly lost. And so we are left to wonder, was Lady Di's preservation the result of scientific genius, spiritual devotion, or something else entirely? And if her tomb holds secrets we still do not understand, how many more lie beneath the hills of China, waiting quietly beneath layers of silk, lacquer, and earth? In the heart of the Eastern Han Dynasty, nearly 2,000 years ago, a bronze vessel sat quietly in the imperial court. Elegant in its form, yet entirely unassuming. It resembled a large urn, cylindrical, finely cast, and adorned with 8 dragon heads, positioned evenly around its upper rim. Beneath each dragon crouched a toad, mouth wide open, as if awaiting a falling droplet of rain. But this was no decorative sculpture. This was something else entirely. Something astonishing. It was a machine. Designed by Zhang Heng, a polymath astronomer, mathematician, and engineer, this device, known today as the Hufeng Didong Yi, or seismoscope, was created to detect earthquakes. Not only those shaking the ground beneath it, but tremors occurring hundreds of kilometers away. The mechanism's workings, as described in ancient Chinese texts, are deceptively simple. When seismic activity was detected, one of the dragon heads would release a bronze ball, which would drop into the waiting mouth of the toad below, signaling the direction from which the earthquake originated. It was not just the first known earthquake detector in history. It was a directional one. But how did it work? That remains the mystery. Zhang Heng never recorded the precise inner workings of his invention. No complete version has survived. What we have are historical references, descriptions passed down in court documents and scholarly commentaries, and a handful of modern reconstructions based on educated guesswork. Some propose a pendulum mechanism at the device's core, reacting to subtle shifts in ground motion. Others suggest a system of levers and weighted triggers, responding to directional forces. But none of the reconstructions fully match the precision attributed to the original. One report from 138 CE tells of the seismoscope detecting an earthquake in western China, more than 500 kilometers from the capital, at a time when no tremor was felt locally. Days later, a messenger confirmed that an earthquake had, in fact, struck the distant province. Zhang Heng's device had known before anyone else. Could such sensitivity really be achieved without electricity, without sensors, without digital calibration? Could a purely mechanical device detect and pinpoint the direction of seismic waves with such accuracy in an era when most of the world had yet to grasp the concept of tectonic movement? Mainstream historians acknowledge Zhang Heng as a genius of his time, a man far ahead of his contemporaries. But even within academic circles, the question remains: was this device a brilliant one-off, a flash of intuitive engineering brilliance? Or was it the product of a deeper tradition of mechanical knowledge, one that has since been lost? Some scholars have pointed to other examples of advanced mechanical devices in early Chinese history: geared astronomical models, intricate clocks, and automata. Could Zhang Heng's seismoscope have been part of this wider, largely undocumented tradition? A culmination of generations of experimentation with movement, force, and resonance. More speculative theories suggest an even broader mystery. A few researchers, looking closely at Chinese geomancy and ancient theories of energy flow, such as QE, have proposed that the seismoscope may have been based not only on physical motion, but on an intuitive understanding of vibrational patterns in the earth. Taoist texts from the period speak of natural rhythms, of resonance between the elements and the heavens. Could Zhang Heng have found a way to combine philosophy and engineering, melding spiritual models of energy with physical systems? Others have proposed that the device's sensitivity may have been enhanced by the materials used, bronze alloys precisely chosen for their acoustic or conductive properties, or that certain harmonic frequencies emitted by tectonic stress deep underground might have triggered the mechanism through resonance. And then there are those who raise the question, quietly, cautiously, of whether Zhang Heng's inspiration came entirely from this world. After all, where did the idea for such a device come from? There are no similar technologies described in Greek, Roman, or Babylonian sources. No earlier prototypes found in excavations. The concept appears in China, fully formed. Was it an invention born purely of intellect and observation? Or was it inherited, handed down from an older source, now vanished from historical record? In the centuries following Zhang Heng's death, Chinese engineering would continue to flourish. But no device matching the capabilities of his seismoscope would appear again until modern times. Why was the technology not preserved, replicated, or expanded upon? Perhaps the knowledge died with him. Or perhaps it was hidden, stored away by those who understood the implications. Today, replicas of the seismoscope sit in museums, elegant reconstructions based on limited knowledge. They are beautiful, but they are silent. None function with the precision attributed to the original. The secret, it seems, has slipped through our fingers. And so, we are left with a bronze vessel, 8 dragons, and the echo of a falling ball. An echo that speaks of a forgotten genius, a lost science, and the possibility that the ancient world was more technologically advanced than we dare to imagine. How did Zhang Heng truly design this device? What principle did he tap into that remains elusive even now? And if such knowledge once existed, what else might lie buried in the scrolls, ruins, and memories of ancient China, waiting, quietly, to be rediscovered? It is said that fire leaves no memory. But in the shadows of China's earliest empire, a fire once raged, not to warm or illuminate, but to erase. It was not kindled in fear or desperation, but in cold calculation. A fire of authority, of silence. The year was 213 BCE. The Qin dynasty had unified the warring states under a single banner. And Emperor Qin Shi Huang, visionary, tyrant, immortal in ambition, sought to forge not just a political unity, but an intellectual one. In a sweeping act of control, he ordered the destruction of all philosophical and historical texts not sanctioned by the state. Books of poetry, astronomy, medicine, and ancient law, works passed down over centuries, were gathered and burned. Entire schools of thought, particularly Confucianism, were deemed subversive, distracting from the emperor's vision of legalist order. And then, in a second and far darker decree, he commanded the burial, alive, of more than 400 scholars who resisted or defied this purification of knowledge. It was a moment of historical violence so profound that its effects can still be felt today. But what exactly was lost? We know that the official justification for the act was political stability. Qin Shi Huang believed that competing ideologies created chaos. By wiping the slate clean, he hoped to reset the cultural memory of China, to build a new world with a single voice, his own. But history is rarely so simple. Among the ashes may have been texts far more precious than politics could explain. According to some accounts, the burning of the books destroyed ancient astronomical records, agricultural treatises, and proto-scientific knowledge that had accumulated over centuries. Some scholars believe that early mathematical models, alternative cosmologies, and regional languages were lost entirely, erased before they could be transcribed or translated. Other whispers speak of even greater secrets, esoteric writings on alchemy, immortality, and lost dynasties that predated the known historical record. Could these have been among the forbidden texts? Did the emperor's fear lie not just in divergent philosophies, but in knowledge that challenged the official origin of his rule? The burial of the scholars adds a layer of haunting finality. Were these men silenced simply for reciting banned verses? Or were they the guardians of deeper wisdom, oral traditions, spiritual formulas, or forbidden histories passed from master to disciple? And if so, did their deaths mark not just the end of debate, but the extinction of knowledge that had never been written down at all? Some researchers have speculated that not all texts were destroyed, that secret libraries may have survived in hidden corners of the empire. The famed tomb of Qin Shi Huang, still unopened to this day, is rumored to contain vast archives, sealed along with its rivers of mercury and model cities. Could the emperor have preserved what he publicly destroyed, locking away the very truths he wanted hidden from others, but safe for himself? Others look to remote temples and mountain monasteries, where reclusive monks may have transcribed forbidden scrolls in secret, preserving fragments of what once was. Even today, ancient texts occasionally resurface, copies of works once thought lost forever, buried in caves or forgotten caches. But these are only fragments, windows into a much larger body of knowledge, now scattered and incomplete. The true tragedy is that we cannot measure what was lost. What philosophies might have offered alternative paths to science, medicine, or ethics? What myths and oral histories, now silenced, might have shifted our understanding of Chinese origins? What visions of the cosmos, the self, the soul, vanished without a trace in those days of flame and stone? It is possible, of course, to view the event through a historical lens, to see it as a grim but logical step in the consolidation of power. But the emotional weight of the act remains. The deliberate destruction of thought, the burial of minds. Some believe the act itself has left a scar on Chinese history, a quiet gap, a missing thread in the continuity of ideas. Others see it as the beginning of an enduring tension between order and expression, between the state and the philosopher, between silence and truth. And perhaps the most haunting question of all is this: did the emperor destroy something that we were never meant to find again? Or did he simply delay its rediscovery, leaving behind clues, hidden, scattered, waiting for a time when they might be understood? In the embers of the past, what knowledge still glows, dim, forgotten, yet unextinguished? And if we listen carefully enough, can we still hear the voices of the scholars beneath the earth, whispering truths the fire could not consume? Beyond the eastern seas of ancient China, far past the reach of maps and mortal understanding, lies a realm whispered of in scrolls and stories, a floating paradise known as Penglai. Said to shimmer above the waves like a mirage, this mythical island was described not as mere land, but as a hidden sanctuary of the immortals. A place where trees bore jewels instead of fruit, where palaces of gold rose from clouds, and where death had no dominion. In classical Chinese mythology, Penglai was not alone. It was one of 5 sacred islands said to drift in the Bohai Sea, tethered to the seabed by great mythical turtles to keep them from floating away. But Penglai stood apart. It was the most radiant, the most revered, a celestial retreat where sages practiced the arts of eternal life, where magical herbs grew wild, and where time itself was said to flow differently. Days passed like moments, centuries like seasons. But what was Penglai truly? A metaphor, a vision, or something more? The earliest accounts come from the Shanhai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas, a compendium of geography and myth, compiled as early as the 4th century BCE. Later texts, especially during the Han Dynasty, elaborated on the legend. Immortals known as the Xian were said to reside there, beings who had transcended the physical world through meditation, alchemy, and divine favor. It was a place beyond suffering, beyond corruption. A divine utopia where wisdom and nature existed in perfect harmony. These stories were not dismissed as fantasy. They were taken seriously. So seriously, in fact, that emperors sent ships in search of it. Qin Shi Huang, the same ruler who unified China and ordered the burning of books and burial of scholars, was obsessed with the quest for immortality. Around 219 BCE, he dispatched envoys, including the famed alchemist Xu Fu, to sail east in search of Penglai. Their mission, to find the elixir of life, said to be guarded by the island's immortal inhabitants. Xu Fu reportedly set sail with ships full of craftsmen, young boys and girls, and offerings to appease the island's spirits. He never returned. What happened to Xu Fu is still debated. Some believe he found the island and chose never to come back. Others claim he reached the shores of Japan, bringing Chinese knowledge and culture with him, an idea that surfaces in both Chinese and Japanese historical folklore. But the fact remains, the island was never officially found. Or was it? Over the centuries, travelers and mystics continued to report sightings of strange islands that appeared and vanished in the sea mist. Sailors spoke of luminous mountains rising from the waves, only to disappear upon approach. Was this simply an effect of atmospheric refraction? A mirage known today as a fata morgana? Or something else? Some scholars suggest that Penglai may have been inspired by real islands, possibly the Shandong Peninsula, or parts of the Ryukyu Islands, cloaked in distance and myth. Others believe it represents an inner world, a symbolic geography of the soul, where immortality is not physical, but spiritual. In Taoist thought, the journey to Penglai could be read as the path to enlightenment, the ultimate withdrawal from worldly desire and entry into cosmic unity. But alternative theories persist. Some suggest that Penglai is not mythical, but metaphysical, that it exists in a different dimension, one accessible only through altered states of consciousness, or through the mastery of ancient spiritual techniques long forgotten. Was it a portal, a fold in the natural order, accessible only to those who had attained a higher vibrational state? Is this why so many emperors failed to reach it? Because they sought it by ship and compass, rather than through the deeper journey inward. Other more speculative voices ask if Penglai may have been a memory of an earlier civilization, one that predated written history and existed offshore, perhaps now submerged beneath rising seas. The descriptions of radiant palaces, technologies of eternal life, and divine beings may have encoded memories of a lost world, half remembered, mythologized, and passed down in the only language available. story. Even today, the myth endures. In the coastal town of Penglai, in Shandong province, a famous mirage occasionally appears over the ocean, shadows of towers and hills flickering above the water. Tourists gather to witness the spectacle. Locals call it the Sea City Mirage. Some smile knowingly. Others wonder, is this simply light playing tricks on the eye? Or is the legend of Penglai still alive, flickering just beyond the horizon? Perhaps that's why the tale continues to fascinate. Penglai is not just a place, it's an idea. A symbol of what lies beyond reach, of the ultimate escape from suffering and decay. A world just over the edge of what we know, glimpsed but never grasped. Did such a place ever exist? Was it a real island, a lost civilization, a spiritual metaphor, or a combination of all three? And if Penglai still floats beyond the veil of the known, what might we find there, waiting in silence, unchanged by time? Beneath the modern city of Luoyang, one of China's ancient capitals, lies a hidden world of silence and stone. Here, under layers of soil and centuries of dust, sprawls a network of vast subterranean tombs, chambers carved with precision, painted with intricate murals, and arranged in ways that suggest far more than simple burial. Some resemble temples, others seem almost like residences for the dead. Together, they form what some have come to call Luoyang's underground city. At first glance, these tombs might appear as grand extensions of imperial funerary customs. After all, Luoyang served as the capital for multiple dynasties, including the Eastern Han, Wei, Jin, and Northern Song. But the deeper archaeologists dig, the stranger the picture becomes. The tombs are not uniform. Their layouts shift. Some extend far beyond the expected dimensions. Hidden corridors twist into darkness. Vaulted chambers rest beneath vaulted chambers, descending like an inverted pyramid. Entire mausoleums lie perfectly aligned along cardinal directions, while others curve subtly, following invisible geometries that no written record explains. The walls whisper stories. Frescoes show not just scenes of court life and religious iconography, but maps of constellations, abstract symbols, and strange hybrid creatures with no direct parallel in known mythology. In some chambers, the air seems to change, cooler, heavier, as if something remains. Time feels suspended. What was the purpose of these spaces? Who designed them? Many of the tombs date to the Eastern Han and Wei dynasties, yet some of the underground structures beneath Luoyang appear to predate even these. Older layers beneath imperial vaults suggest the possibility of reuse, new dynasties building upon older, forgotten foundations. This has led some scholars to ask, was there an even earlier city here, one that existed not on the surface, but below? Mainstream archaeology interprets the tombs as expressions of status, power, and afterlife belief. Indeed, ancient Chinese burial practices were deeply complex, reflecting a desire to continue existence beyond death. Tombs were built as homes for the deceased, complete with kitchens, storage rooms, and sometimes even restrooms, symbolic or otherwise. Inscriptions often invoke blessings, ancestral connections, and cosmic harmony. But Luoyang is different. Its density of subterranean tombs is unmatched anywhere else in China. And unlike the relatively isolated imperial tombs of other regions, here, entire districts seem to lie buried. Clusters of underground structures, linked by corridors or aligned in repeating patterns, suggest coordination on a grand scale. Some chambers are entirely unmarked. No names, no epigraphs. Just empty rooms, polished walls, and sealed doorways that lead to more questions. One tomb, discovered in 2011, revealed a series of interlocking rooms decorated with motifs rarely seen in Han art. The figures, slender, elongated, with featureless faces, stood in ritual poses, surrounding a central basin made of an unknown mineral. The layout did not match any known ritual structure. Scholars were divided. Was it ceremonial, astronomical, something else entirely? And then there are the legends. Local folklore has long spoken of hidden palaces beneath Luoyang, of tunnels connecting the ancient city to sacred mountains and distant temples. Old maps depict underground streets that do not correspond to modern layouts. Tales tell of monks, emperors, and hermits who vanished into the earth, seeking immortality or refuge from war. More fringe theories abound. Some suggest the underground city was part of a spiritual complex, a massive Taoist or pre-Taoist center devoted to celestial alignment and transformation of the soul. Others whisper of a lost sect, perhaps foreign, whose rituals required isolation beneath the ground. A few, more boldly, propose that these tombs were never intended for the dead at all, but for something else. Were they repositories of knowledge, vaults for safeguarding ancient technology? We may never know. One persistent anomaly is the engineering itself. The level of stonework, clean angles, reinforced vaults, hidden drainage systems, often rivals or surpasses that of surface architecture from the same era. How did they achieve such precision underground, with only torchlight and rudimentary tools? And why was so much effort poured into what was, supposedly, a place meant to be sealed forever? Satellite scans and subsurface imaging suggest there may be even more chambers still buried, deeper and more extensive than previously thought. Some lie beneath modern infrastructure and remain untouched, their entrances sealed, their contents unknown. Is it possible that the city we know above ground was merely a facade? That the true heart of ancient Luoyang was always below? As we walk through the streets of the present, we walk above thousands of years of secrets. Rooms no one has entered, walls no one has read, chambers that may have been silent for millennia, yet still echo with meaning. What lies behind the sealed stone doors beneath Luoyang? And what memory of the past, untouched, unspoken, waits patiently in the dark to be found again? As we rise from the stone chambers of Luoyang's underground tombs, we emerge not into sunlight, but into starlight. Because just as the ancients looked downward to bury their dead in precision-cut vaults, they also looked upward, mapping the heavens with a detail and understanding that continues to astound modern science. Among the most remarkable artifacts of ancient Chinese astronomy is a series of star maps, some inscribed on silk, others painted on walls, and still others passed down in scrolls written over 2,000 years ago. Their purpose was not merely observational. These maps reflected something deeper, a belief that the movements of the heavens were intimately linked to the fate of the earth. But what remains puzzling is not just their symbolic importance, it's how accurate they truly are. The most famous of these celestial documents is the Dunhuang star chart, discovered in the early 20th century inside the hidden library cave at the Mogao Grottos. Dating back to the Tang dynasty, around the 7th century CE, the chart contains over 1,300 individual stars. They are arranged not randomly or symbolically, but with careful precision, grouped into recognizable constellations, placed in positions that mirror what would have been visible in the night sky over northern China. Even more astonishingly, the stars are laid out using an early form of projection, similar to techniques that wouldn't formally appear in the West until centuries later. There is structure here, geometry, and a deep understanding of celestial mechanics. But this is not where the story begins. Records show that Chinese astronomers were mapping the skies as far back as the Shang dynasty, over 3,000 years ago. Oracle bones contain references to eclipses, comets, and planetary alignments. By the time of the Han dynasty, Systematic star catalogues were being compiled. Ancient texts like the Shiji and Book of Han describe a sky divided into regions, the 3 enclosures, and 28 mansions, forming a celestial coordinate system that predates many similar systems elsewhere in the world. And the question naturally follows, how did they know so much? Without telescopes, without modern optics, how did early Chinese astronomers track thousands of stars, record their movements, and align them into accurate maps? Were these records passed down from an even earlier source? Or did they have observational techniques, perhaps involving mirrors, water surfaces, or lens-like stones, that we no longer understand? Mainstream historians credit centuries of careful sky-watching, combined with mathematical rigor and imperial support. The Chinese court employed official astronomers whose duty it was to monitor the heavens. In a society where celestial omens could determine the legitimacy of a ruler, accuracy was paramount. But even this doesn't fully explain certain anomalies. Take, for example, the record of the guest star observed in 1054 CE. Chinese astronomers documented a bright object that appeared suddenly in the sky and remained visible for nearly 2 years. Today, we know it was a supernova, its remnants still visible as the Crab Nebula. The Chinese record of this event is among the most precise in the world, offering a detailed timeline of its appearance, behavior, and disappearance. No modern equipment, no digital sensors, just the trained human eye. And something more. Some researchers suggest the possibility of lost tools, mechanical devices like the armillary sphere, or water clocks that may have allowed for more accurate observation than we assume. Others speculate that certain observations may have been passed down orally from prehistoric traditions, preserved through priest astronomers or shamanic lineages stretching far beyond recorded history. And then there are the more speculative voices. Could some of these star charts reflect a knowledge not just of what was seen, but of what was taught? Were the Chinese astronomers mapping not only what was above, but what they believed existed beyond? Sacred geometries, cosmic cycles, or patterns invisible to the eye? Some Taoist texts describe the stars as gates, each with spiritual significance, connected to the inner workings of the human body. Were the maps practical, spiritual, or both? More fringe theorists point to the uncanny similarity between star maps across unrelated civilizations. The constellations of Orion, the Pleiades, and Draco appear in multiple ancient cultures, often with similar stories and placements. Is this coincidence, cultural diffusion, or, as some suggest, evidence of a shared global understanding of the stars, one that may have originated from a common, forgotten source? Whatever their origin, the Chinese star maps remain among the most detailed ancient sky records ever discovered. Their accuracy is so high that modern astronomers have used them to study celestial changes over time, measuring how stars have shifted across centuries. And yet, mysteries remain. What information has been lost from these maps? Were their versions even older than the ones we now possess? Maps etched on wood, silk, or stone that have not survived? Did they encode knowledge that extended beyond astronomy, about time, fate, or the structure of the universe itself? Today, when we gaze at the stars, we use satellites and telescopes that orbit the Earth. But 2 millennia ago, in the darkness above Luoyang, Chang'an, or Dunhuang, others stood beneath the same sky, drawing silent lines between stars, capturing the language of the heavens with brush and ink. How much did they truly understand? And if we could read their maps, not just with science, but with the mindset they brought to the sky, what might they still have to teach us? From mountaintops veiled in mist to islands drifting on silver clouds, ancient Chinese mythology speaks of towers that rose not from stone or earth, but from the air itself. Suspended between heaven and the mortal world, these floating structures glimmered in the sky, unreachable by foot or horse, shimmering like stars at the edge of perception. They appear in legends, poems, and temple carvings, described as radiant pavilions or celestial palaces, often built of jade and gold, with stairways that reached into the clouds and spires that pierced the fabric of the heavens. In Taoist texts, these towers were more than myth. They were symbols of transcendence, homes to immortals, or gateways to realms not governed by time. But could there have been more to these visions than mere symbolism? The first references to floating towers, or Feilo, can be traced back to the Warring States period and the early Han Dynasty. Descriptions vary. Some speak of luminous structures seen above remote mountains, others of palaces that descend momentarily before vanishing into thin air. One early text tells of a tower of the Western Queen Mother appearing in the sky above Mount Kunlun, enveloped in a halo of light and accompanied by strange music no one could place. To the ancient Chinese mind, such visions were not hallucinations. They were considered signs, manifestations of divine favor, or warnings from the celestial bureaucracy. Emperors sent envoys to sacred mountains, where these towers were said to appear, hoping to receive wisdom, or perhaps to glimpse the mysteries of immortality. Taoist alchemists, in particular, were fascinated by these floating edifices. They spoke of palaces in the void, accessible not by climbing, but through spiritual elevation. In their view, the towers were real, but not in the physical sense. They existed on higher planes of vibration, visible only to those who had shed worldly attachments and achieved inner harmony. Yet not all accounts were visionary or symbolic. Some chroniclers insisted that entire villages had witnessed radiant towers in the sky. They described structures drifting across the horizon, occasionally descending toward the earth before rising again. Always silent, always elusive. What were they seeing? Mainstream historians interpret these stories as allegories, representations of the Taoist path, or dramatizations of spiritual insight. Others suggest that such sightings could have been caused by rare atmospheric phenomena, superior mirages, or fata morgana illusions, which can distort and elevate distant objects into eerie floating shapes. In rare cases, a city or mountain viewed from far away can appear inverted or magnified in the sky, hovering like a phantom over the land. But atmospheric optics alone may not account for the consistency and frequency of these tales across time and region. In the classic of Mountains and Seas, Shan Hai Jing, ancient geography blends seamlessly with the supernatural. There, descriptions of floating palaces and aerial temples are framed not as visions, but as cartographic facts. The Western Paradise, ruled by Zhuangmu, the Queen Mother of the West, is described as a land with ascending towers that never cast a shadow, visited by cranes and phoenixes. Are these simply metaphors for the divine, or do they preserve memories of something else? Some fringe researchers propose a more radical theory, that these legends may be distant echoes of a forgotten technology. If, at some point in the ancient past, a highly advanced culture had existed, perhaps predating recorded Chinese history, could these floating towers have been real? Could they have been aerial platforms or energy constructs seen by later generations who lacked the words to describe what they had witnessed? Of course, there is no hard evidence to support such claims, no ancient machines, no fragments of aerial architecture. And yet, the persistence of the motif, across dynasties, regions, and spiritual traditions, raises questions. Why do so many cultures, not only in China but worldwide, tell of floating structures? In India, vimanas. In Mesoamerica, sky temples. In China, Feilu. Different names, different details, but perhaps a shared memory of something once glimpsed in the skies. Modern Taoist temples sometimes replicate these motifs, building high towers crowned with spires and golden finials meant to echo the mythical architecture of the immortals. In this way, the vision is preserved, not as literal truth, perhaps, but as spiritual aspiration. The tower becomes a symbol of ascent, of transcendence, of leaving behind the heaviness of the world. But what if there's more beneath the surface? Ancient Chinese astronomy often emphasized the link between earthly structures and celestial patterns. Cities and temples were laid out to mirror constellations, reflecting a belief in the unity of heaven and earth. Could the floating towers represent this same concept, points where heaven drew near, where the barriers between dimensions thinned? And if so, is it possible that the ancient observers weren't inventing these stories, but recording rare, real experiences, moments where the ordinary sky opened up, revealing something extraordinary, however briefly? The floating towers of ancient Chinese mythology remain suspended between fact and fable, science and spirit. They rise in poems and scriptures, vanish in the blink of an eye, and leave behind nothing but awe. Were they illusions, symbols, echoes of a forgotten reality? Or are they still out there, gliding silently beyond the veil, waiting for another moment when the sky is just right, and the watchers below are willing to look up? As the mist of myth begins to part and the first traces of written Chinese history emerge, one name lingers in a space between legend and reality: the Xia dynasty. Often described as China's first dynasty, it occupies a peculiar place in the nation's memory, venerated in ancient texts, yet elusive in the archaeological record. According to tradition, the Xia reigned over the Yellow River Basin for nearly 5 centuries, beginning around 2070 BCE, long before the more concrete dynasties of Shang and Zhou. But what remains puzzling is this: for a dynasty so crucial in China's foundational narrative, no definitive evidence of its existence has ever been found. Or has it? The story begins with ancient chronicles. In the Shujing, the Book of Documents, and the Bamboo Annals, the Xia are described as descendants of the Great Yu the Great, the legendary engineer king who tamed the catastrophic floods of the Yellow River. His reward was kingship and the establishment of a hereditary rule, thus beginning the Xia line. These records speak of a succession of 17 rulers, of noble acts and divine punishments, of decline into corruption, and of eventual conquest by the rising Shang. But for centuries, these stories were seen as largely mythical, passed down through oral tradition, and recorded only centuries after the supposed fall of the dynasty. The earliest surviving Chinese texts, including oracle bones from the Shang era, make no mention of the Xia. For a long time, the Xia were treated not as a historical fact, but as a symbolic origin, a moral tale to explain the transfer of the mandate of heaven from one line of kings to another. That changed in the 20th century, when archaeologists began to uncover traces of a Bronze Age culture beneath the layers associated with the Shang. Near the modern-day city of Yanxi, in Henan province, they found the remains of what would come to be called the Early Tu culture. Spanning roughly from 1900 to 1500 BCE, the Early Tu site revealed palatial complexes, ceremonial platforms, sophisticated bronzework, and evidence of centralized administration. Roads, drainage systems, and signs of social stratification all pointed to an advanced and organized society, one predating the known rise of the Shang. Many scholars now propose that the Early Tu culture could be the archaeological footprint of the Xia dynasty. But even here, the debate continues. The Early Tu culture matches the time frame and geography described in the ancient texts, yet nowhere at the site is the name Xia found. No inscriptions, no royal seals, no direct link between the myths and the material remains. Are we looking at the remains of a lost dynasty? or at an entirely different civilization, later woven into the national myth. And if the Xia were real, why did they vanish so completely? Some historians argue that the Xia's disappearance was gradual, the result of cultural absorption, political conquest, and the erasure of oral histories by victorious successors. Others suggest the Xia were never a dynasty in the traditional sense, but a confederation of clans, later elevated into a royal line by the Zhou dynasty to legitimize their own rule. But more speculative theories persist. Some propose that the Xia may have represented a lineage of knowledge keepers, masters of early hydraulic engineering, astronomy, and ritual, who passed their understanding through temples and hidden schools, rather than through palaces or stone monuments. When the Shang rose to power, they may have displaced these traditions, reworking the Xia legacy into legend, to both honor and obscure what came before. Others point to sudden climatic events, great floods, droughts, or even celestial phenomena that could have shattered the social and agricultural systems of early dynastic rule. In the ancient stories, the Xia decline is marked by strange omens, lost virtues, and environmental instability. Are these merely moral allegories, or memories of real catastrophes? More fringe interpretations suggest that the Xia were protectors of a forgotten form of knowledge, perhaps even of a lost technology, philosophical system, or a cosmological code, and that their disappearance was no accident. In this view, their erasure may have been deliberate, an intentional burying of something powerful, preserved only in myth. Today, China recognizes the Xia dynasty in its official history. Museums dedicate exhibits to it. Textbooks recount the lineage. And yet, deep down, the question remains unresolved. There is no royal tomb definitively linked to a Xia king, no undisputed record bearing the name, no single object to bridge the space between archaeology and tradition. And so, the Xia remains suspended, between the written word and the buried earth, between memory and silence. Were they the first to lay the foundations of Chinese civilization, or the first to be mythologized by those who followed? And if their legacy has survived only in fragments of story and shards of bronze, what else lies buried beneath the yellow river silt, waiting to speak across the millennia? Perhaps the Xia dynasty is not a question of fact or fiction, but a mirror reflecting our desire to understand where history ends and where something deeper begins, in a quiet chamber deep within the walled confines of a Taoist monastery. A fire once flickered beneath a bronze crucible. The air was thick with the scent of herbs, minerals, and incense. Scrolls lined the shelves, filled with diagrams of the human body as a cosmos, formulas etched in flowing calligraphy, and cryptic instructions whispered across generations. This was not a place of prayer or worship. It was a laboratory of the spirit. This was the hidden world of ancient Chinese alchemy. To the untrained eye, Chinese alchemy may appear simply as a search for immortality, an obsession with elixirs and potions, with turning base metals into gold and achieving eternal life. And indeed, that desire does pulse through its long and tangled history. But beneath the surface lies something far more complex. Chinese alchemy, or Dan Dao, the way of the elixir, was not merely a pursuit of physical transformation. It was a path toward harmony with the universe, a system where matter and spirit intertwined, and where every element, every reaction, mirrored a truth about existence itself. The earliest known alchemical texts date back over 2,000 years, reaching their first true flourishing during the Han Dynasty. These writings speak of cinnabar, mercury, lead, and jade, not only as substances, but as manifestations of cosmic forces. The alchemist's task was not simply to combine or purify them, but to understand their roles in the broader order of nature, the Tao. Furnaces were built according to geomantic principles, Ingredients were gathered according to planetary alignments. The timing of a reaction could be as important as the materials themselves. This was not chemistry as we understand it today. It was a sacred act. And yet, many of the results were very real, and sometimes dangerously so. Historical records describe emperors ingesting concoctions of mercury and arsenic, believing them to be elixirs of immortality. Ironically, some died not from age, but from these very potions. Did they misunderstand the texts, or were they seeking something that was never meant to be taken literally? Within Taoist philosophy, alchemy took two main forms: Weidan, the external alchemy of pills, metals, and furnaces, and Nidan, the internal alchemy of breath, meditation, and the cultivation of inner energy, or qi. The more symbolic and spiritual Nidan would become dominant over time, teaching that the true elixir of life was not a substance to be swallowed, but a process of self-transformation, a refinement of the body, mind, and spirit into something timeless. But the boundary between inner and outer alchemy was never so clearly drawn. Some ancient texts describe elaborate visualizations of internal organs transforming into elements, of golden light rising through energy channels, of the immortal embryo forming in the center of the body like a cosmic seed. Other passages detail intricate chemical recipes, often encoded in metaphor, that mirror these inner processes. Were these metaphors meant to guide meditative states, or did they encode actual physical practices, carefully disguised to avoid misuse? Modern scholars continue to debate the true intentions behind these works. Some interpret them as early medical texts, hidden in layers of allegory. Others see them as philosophical systems, a bridge between science and mysticism. Still others suggest that Chinese alchemy may have preserved knowledge from earlier, lost traditions, passed down not in temples, but in the secrecy of mountain retreats and hidden schools. One enduring mystery lies in the peculiar persistence of mercury and cinnabar in so many of these alchemical processes. In Western alchemy, mercury also holds a central place. It was seen as the mediator between sulfur and salt, the soul between body and spirit. In China, cinnabar, mercury sulfide, was revered as the dragon's essence, glowing red like blood or fire. It was believed to hold the key to both immortality and transformation. Why this element? Why across cultures? Could it be that ancient alchemists, through trial and observation, recognized a unique property in mercury, something not merely toxic or transmutable, but catalytic, both chemically and spiritually? Or does it reflect a symbolic convergence, an intuitive grasp of transformation, where the liquid, shifting nature of mercury mirrored the alchemist's own journey? And what about the recurring mention of gold? In Chinese alchemy, gold was not prized for its wealth, but for its incorruptibility. It did not tarnish, it did not rot. To become like gold was to become unchanging, immune to decay, to time, to death. But again, the goal was not just to own gold. It was to become it, in spirit and in essence. So was the alchemical laboratory, a literal furnace, or a mirror of the soul. As with so many ancient mysteries, we are left with fragments, manuscripts half decayed, ingredients misidentified, riddles left unsolved. And yet, the language of transformation endures. The idea that something in us, through intention, discipline, and insight, can become something more. Today, the legacy of Chinese alchemy can be seen in traditional medicine, in qigong, in martial arts, and in Taoist philosophy. But the deeper layers remain veiled. The full scope of its practice, its tools, its goals, its origins, are still not fully understood. Was Chinese alchemy a science disguised as myth, a spiritual path misunderstood as superstition, or a system so advanced, so nuanced, that we have yet to rediscover its full meaning? And if one day, Buried in an ancient cave or sealed within a forgotten scroll, we were to find the missing key. What would it unlock? The secrets of the cosmos, or the transformation of ourselves? Beneath the humid soil of the Yangtze River Delta, not far from the modern city of Hangzhou, archaeologists unearthed something remarkable. Objects of extraordinary precision and elegance, buried in tombs over 5,000 years old. Carved from flawless jade, perfectly circular with a central hole. These enigmatic relics are known as sky discs, silent witnesses to the forgotten world of the Liangzhu culture. They glisten with a quiet power. Smooth, symmetrical, and almost impossibly well-crafted. Each disc seems untouched by time, as if it had been carved not by hand, but by something beyond the limitations of Neolithic tools. Ranging in size from palm width to nearly a meter in diameter, the discs were buried alongside the elite of Liangzhu society, placed near the head or chest of the deceased, often paired with kong, square jade tubes with circular cores, inscribed with strange, abstract patterns. What were they meant to represent? Traditional interpretations hold that the bi symbolized the heavens, while the kong represented the earth or the axis mundi, the cosmic pillar that connects the two. Their placement in burials may have reflected a belief in cosmic balance, in the journey of the soul from the earthly realm to a higher celestial plane. But if the Liangzhu people saw these objects as sacred, why were they rendered with such mathematical perfection? The Liangzhu culture thrived between 3,300 and 2,300 BCE, contemporaneous with ancient Mesopotamia and predating dynastic China by more than a millennium. Yet their urban centers featured advanced hydrological engineering, vast canal systems, flood defenses, and platform-based architecture built atop man-made terraces. And their jade work remains unmatched. Jade is an incredibly hard stone. It cannot be carved with bronze or copper. And yet, the Liangzhu artisans shaped it with precision and polish rivaling modern lapidary work. Without iron tools, without diamond drills, without writing. How? Some researchers suggest they used abrasives, fine sand, water, and persistence. Others argue that we still don't fully understand their methods, pointing to the symmetry, the smoothness, and the near-microscopic grooves in the jade's surface. Could there have been lost tools, wooden lathes, bow drills, or methods passed through oral tradition and never recorded? But it's not just the craftsmanship that invites mystery. It's the purpose. Why dedicate so much effort, so many labor hours, to creating objects that had no apparent function? The discs show no signs of wear, no fittings or mechanical purpose. They were not weapons, tools, or currency. They were symbolic. But of what? Some scholars believe the discs were used in rituals, held up to the sun, worn during ceremonies, or used to mark seasonal transitions. Others propose that they were astronomical devices, perhaps used to track celestial movements. One theory posits that the hole in the center allowed light to pass through at specific angles, functioning as a solar calendar or aligning with constellations. And yet, there are no inscriptions, no diagrams, no written texts to confirm these ideas. Just the discs, silent, elegant, and unyielding. More speculative theories have emerged in recent years. Some have noted similarities between the bi discs and artifacts found in distant cultures, from the stone circles of Europe to Mesoamerican solar symbols. Is this coincidence? Or could the Liangzhu have inherited or transmitted cosmic concepts that crossed early cultural boundaries in ways we do not yet understand? Others go further still. A few theorists suggest the discs resemble technological objects, portals, navigational instruments, or energy devices. In their view, the jade's piezoelectric properties, combined with the precision of the carving, might hint at forgotten forms of knowledge, ways of channeling or harnessing natural energies that have since vanished from human memory. Mainstream archaeology rightly treats these ideas with caution, but the mystery remains. For a Neolithic culture, the Liangzhu displayed a startling level of sophistication, not only in jade, but in city planning, flood control, and spiritual architecture. And then, around 2300 BCE, it all disappears. The cities were abandoned. The jade workshops fell silent. No records explain why. Some suggest climate change, catastrophic flooding of the Yangtze Delta that made the region uninhabitable. Others propose internal conflict or shifts in trade routes that undermine the elite ruling class. Whatever the cause, the Liangzhu culture vanished, leaving only its jades, its silent discs and tubes buried in the tombs of the honored dead. Today, the sky discs are preserved in glass cases in Chinese museums. Lit from above, they glow with an almost otherworldly light. Visitors gaze into their centers and see reflections of themselves, of the past, of something they can't quite name. What did the Liangzhu know that we have forgotten? Were the discs symbols of faith, tools of science, or fragments of a language no longer spoken? And as we stare through the center of each perfect circle, are we looking into the heavens, or into the heart of a mystery that still waits patiently, 5,000 years later, to be understood? In the shadow of Mount Li, beneath an immense mound of earth guarded by legions of silent terracotta soldiers, lies the sealed tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, a sovereign whose vision was unmatched and whose ambition extended beyond conquest and empire. More than unification, more than power, what he truly sought was something far more elusive, something no ruler before him had ever achieved: immortality. Among the many legends that swirl around the Qin emperor, few are as compelling, or as tragic, as his obsession with the elixir of life. Throughout his reign, Qin Shi Huang invested vast resources in the search for a substance that would grant him eternal youth. He consulted shamans, alchemists, and mystics. He sent expeditions across land and sea. He constructed vast underground palaces. And always, he hunted for the formula that would allow him to defy death itself. But was this merely a product of fear? Or did the emperor believe he was destined to transcend mortality? The historical records tell a fascinating story. According to records of the grand historian, Shiji, the emperor dispatched envoys to the eastern seas in search of Penglai, the mythical island of the immortals. Among them was the famed alchemist Xu Fu, who sailed with ships laden with young men and women, artisans, and offerings. He was never seen again. Some say he found the island and stayed. Others suggest he reached the shores of Japan, establishing legends of his own. But Qin Shi Huang did not wait idly. At court, Taoist alchemists worked tirelessly to craft elixirs that promised to extend life, purify the body, and open gateways to the divine. Many of these potions contained mercury, cinnabar, arsenic, and rare minerals, all considered sacred substances capable of transformation. Mercury, in particular, was thought to hold the essence of fluidity and change, a perfect symbol for eternal life. Ironically, it may have also been the very substance that killed him. Modern historians and toxicologists have long speculated that the emperor's health declined rapidly due to mercury poisoning, a tragic consequence of ingesting his own elixirs. Symptoms consistent with mercury exposure, paranoia, tremors, and eventual collapse, are all noted in ancient accounts of his final days. The very substance he believed would grant him immortality may have hastened his death. And yet, there is more to the story. When his tomb was first described by the Han historian Sima Qian, the account included rivers of flowing mercury, said to mimic the great waterways of China. Measurements taken at the burial site in modern times have indeed detected unusually high levels of mercury in the surrounding soil. Were these traces a symbolic offering, or part of something else? A ritual function? A preserved laboratory? Or, as some suggest, a massive subterranean experiment tied to the emperor's final bid for transcendence? What exactly did Qin Shi Huang believe about immortality? Taoist thought during the Warring States period offered a range of perspectives on the afterlife. Some believed the soul could ascend to the stars. Others saw the universe as a cyclical force, where transformation, not stasis, was the highest form of immortality. But for the emperor, who had bent an entire civilization to his will, physical continuity seemed paramount. He did not want to be remembered. He wanted to endure. It's easy to frame his pursuit as hubris. Yet it mirrors a longing found across cultures and eras, the desire to cheat death, to linger in the world we know. And while many emperors built monuments, Qin Shi Huang built a tomb that was not merely a resting place, but a concealed cosmos. A replica of the world, sealed in darkness, hidden from time. Did he believe that his body, preserved in such conditions, might one day reawaken? Was the tomb a chrysalis, not a coffin? Some have speculated that the emperor's efforts went beyond potions. There are cryptic references in ancient texts to other methods, breathing exercises, secret rituals, strange meditative states that could preserve life force. Were these practices metaphors for spiritual awakening? Or were they parts of a fragmented, now lost system that blurred the line between alchemy and medicine, between death and dreaming? There is even a theory, rare yet persistent, that Qin Shi Huang's greatest secret was never buried at all. That his body, or his knowledge, was removed before the tomb was sealed, hidden, protected, waiting. Of course, these ideas remain speculative. No one has entered the central chamber of the tomb. Fearing damage to the delicate contents within, Chinese authorities have opted to preserve it as it is. The rivers of mercury, the layout of stars on the ceiling, the mechanisms designed to prevent intruders. None have been directly confirmed, but neither have they been disproved. What, then, was the true nature of Qin Shi Huang's search? Was it a desperate attempt to conquer the final frontier? Or the calculated work of a ruler who believed that death could be managed like territory? As the centuries pass, his sealed mausoleum remains one of the greatest untouched archaeological sites in the world. The answers may lie beneath the soil, or they may never surface at all. And so, we are left with a question that lingers like vapor on the breath. Did Qin Shi Huang truly believe he could live forever? Or did he, in the end, achieve a different kind of immortality? One buried not in time, but in mystery? In the humid soil of Chengdu's western outskirts, construction workers digging in 2001 struck something unusual, something ancient. What emerged from the ground was not part of the modern city, but the remnants of a forgotten one. Ceremonial altars, gold masks, ivory tusks, and jade artifacts, preserved for over 3,000 years. This was the Jinsha site, once hidden, now one of the most important archaeological discoveries of early Chinese civilization. But among its many wonders, none are more haunting than the markings, enigmatic symbols etched onto objects whose meanings we still do not fully understand. The Jinsha culture, believed to have flourished around 1200 BCE, is thought to be a continuation or sister civilization of the Sanxingdui culture, known for its surreal bronze masks and alien-like sculptures. But while the visual power of Jinsha's relics is undeniable, it is the presence of strange, undeciphered symbols on certain artifacts, symbols that seem almost like a forgotten script, that adds a layer of mystery that scholars have yet to penetrate. On pieces of ivory, on pottery shards, and carved into jade plaques, these markings appear, delicate lines, dots, and geometric shapes that do not match any known system of Chinese writing. They are not purely decorative. They follow patterns. They repeat. They vary slightly from one object to the next, just enough to suggest intention, perhaps syntax. But if this is writing, what language does it record? Unlike the oracle bone script of the Shang dynasty, which evolved into recognizable Chinese characters, the symbols found at Jinsha appear entirely independent. They are not simply early Chinese, nor are they easily traced to later systems. Some symbols resemble pictographs, others abstract glyphs. Were they meant to be read, or were they sacred markings, ritual signs passed from generation to generation, never committed to full linguistic form? One theory posits that these were proto-writing systems, mnemonic devices used by priests or shamans to preserve oral histories or spiritual codes. Another suggests they were cosmological symbols, encoding information about the stars, seasons, or spiritual hierarchies. After all, the Jinsha site itself seems arranged with ceremonial purpose, altars aligned with the solstices, storage pits filled with offerings, and a central layout that implies ritual significance. Could these markings, then, be more than language? Could they represent a kind of spiritual grammar? A set of visual incantations meant not for communication between people, but between people and the divine. Adding to the mystery is the golden sunbird, perhaps the most iconic artifact of Jinsha. A thin, perfectly symmetrical gold foil disc, only 0.02 centimeters thick, etched with a 4-part swirling motif and 4 birds in flight around a central hole. It has been interpreted as a solar symbol, perhaps linked to the worship of heavenly bodies. And while the disc itself bears no script, it shares an aesthetic sensibility with other inscribed objects at the site, suggesting that both were part of a coherent belief system, one we no longer understand. Some researchers have drawn comparisons between the Jinsha markings and symbols from other early cultures, Neolithic signs from the Liangzhu culture, the undeciphered script of the Indus Valley, or even early Mesoamerican glyphs. Are these similarities real, or merely the human tendency to find patterns in the unknown? Others point to a more speculative idea, that these symbols are not simply a local invention, but remnants of a broader, older system of thought, one that predates recorded history and may have been dispersed across ancient civilizations before vanishing beneath waves, jungles, and time. What supports this notion is not just the markings themselves, but the context in which they were found. The Jinsha site, like Sanxingdui before it, appears to have been suddenly abandoned. Around 1000 BCE, the entire settlement vanished from the archaeological record. No signs of war, no gradual decline, just silence. Some attribute the collapse to environmental disaster, massive floods or earthquakes, but others wonder if there was more. A migration, a taboo event, or the culmination of a prophecy etched into symbols that no one now can read. For now, the writings of Jinsha remain mute. Linguists, archaeologists, and mathematicians have all attempted to decode them, but without a Rosetta Stone, without parallel texts, bilingual inscriptions, or surviving oral traditions, the symbols remain isolated fragments of a language we no longer speak. Yet, the mystery endures. We are left with ivory pieces inscribed with purpose, and a culture that seemed to speak through shape, ritual, and image. What were they trying to say? Were these instructions, prayers, warnings? And if they had written more, on wood, on silk, on something perishable, how much of their knowledge have we already lost? Perhaps we are standing at the edge of a forgotten script, one that, like the ruins around it, tells a story not of a single site, but of an entire worldview. A philosophy of light, of celestial rhythm, of unseen order carved into jade and gold. And so we look at the Jinsha symbols, not with certainty, but with a quiet question. Is this the writing of a lost language, or the last whisper of a world that spoke to the sky and waited for an answer we are only now beginning to hear? Nestled within the tranquil geometry of ancient Chinese temple gardens, among winding paths, lotus-filled ponds, and curved pavilions, stand objects that, at first glance, seem merely decorative. Polished stone slabs, crescent-shaped walls, or paired metallic discs placed at strange angles to one another. Their surfaces catch the morning light. Their forms echo the curvature of moon gates or the arcs of the heavens. But these were not just aesthetic features. They were instruments, silent, subtle, and astonishing. They are known today as sound mirrors, constructed from stone, bronze, or ceramic materials. These mysterious devices were embedded within sacred architecture across dynasties, most notably during the Tang and Song periods. In some gardens, a whisper spoken toward one of these structures could be heard, perfectly clear, at another located dozens of meters away. In temple courtyards, a soft tone would linger or bounce in unexpected ways, as if the space itself had been tuned like a musical instrument. What was their purpose? At a technical level, sound mirrors operate through the principles of parabolic reflection. Their curved surfaces capture sound waves and focus them to a central point, amplifying quiet noises or transmitting them over distance. But the presence of such acoustic sophistication in places of ritual and meditation, far removed from military or scientific settings, invites deeper questions. Were these acoustic marvels the result of empirical experimentation? Or were they part of a broader, now lost understanding of space, resonance, and spiritual harmony? Historical texts make only passing reference to these structures. In treatises on garden design and temple architecture, there are subtle clues, mentions of walls that carry the voice of the sage, or courts where the wind and sound are balanced. In Taoist thought, sound was never just vibration. It was breath, spirit, intention made audible. In Buddhism, sound was a vehicle for awakening. Mantras, gongs, and chants meant not only to be heard, but to change the shape of consciousness itself. Could the sound mirrors, then, have been spiritual tools? In some monastic layouts, mirrors were placed in alignment with water features or facing key architectural points. A murmur by a monk at one end of a garden could be heard by another across the space, without anyone in between being aware. Was this a means of secret communication, or a kind of sonic communion? Two voices meeting across emptiness, echoing the Taoist idea of action through stillness. Some researchers believe the mirrors were used to train concentration and clarity of speech. Whispering into a mirror required precise alignment, both physically and mentally. A slight shift in angle, and the sound would vanish. In this view, the mirrors served as meditative devices, helping practitioners refine both their voice and their awareness of space. Others suggest a more ceremonial function. Imagine a ritual, a priest reciting sacred texts toward a sound mirror, his voice carried invisibly across the temple grounds, arriving like a breath in the ear of another initiate. Was this meant to emulate the voice of the divine, present but unseen? Or perhaps it was intended to symbolize transmission of knowledge, not through writing or gesture, but through pure resonance. More speculative theories go further still. Some believe the mirrors were aligned to natural frequencies, resonating subtly with the ambient sounds of wind, water, and birdsong. These natural tones, when focused by the mirrors, could create harmonic effects that altered perception. Was this early sound therapy, a way to tune the body's inner rhythms to the environment? Were the ancients experimenting with what we now call psychoacoustics, not as entertainment, but as spiritual technology? And then there are the legends. In certain provinces, old stories tell of hidden, talking walls, places where the voice of a long-dead master could still be heard if one stood in the right spot and listened at the right hour. Some temples were said to have rooms where prayers whispered into one corner would be answered from the opposite side, as if the architecture itself were sentient. Could some of these accounts be based on the phenomena created by ancient sound mirrors? Modern reconstructions have confirmed that these devices could, indeed, transmit sound across surprising distances with remarkable clarity. But no detailed plans for their construction survive. No manual, no formula. The knowledge appears to have been passed down through experience, intuitive, experimental, and ultimately lost. Perhaps the most curious aspect of the mirrors is not their function, but their disappearance. Why did these devices, which clearly served some purpose, fade from use? Were they abandoned because their true meaning was forgotten? Or because they no longer fit the changing philosophies of later dynasties? Did their subtle power become a threat in more rigid, hierarchical societies? Or were they meant to be temporary all along, tools for a world attuned to silence, stillness, and the music of the unseen? Today, a few ancient sound mirrors remain, restored, preserved, but largely unrecognized for what they once were. Tourists pass them without noticing. Yet, when someone stands in the right spot and speaks barely above a whisper, the words travel as if carried by invisible threads. We are left to wonder, were these simply architectural curiosities, or part of a sophisticated system of sound and space, now mostly forgotten? And if we could truly hear the way the ancients heard, what messages might still echo quietly across the gardens of time, at the edge of memory, where myth and history blur into a single current? There is a story whispered through jade scrolls, temple walls, and the soft rustling of ancient river reeds. It is the tale of Nuwa, the half-goddess, half-serpent mother of humankind, and her battle against the chaos of a world undone by water. In the crumbling corners of China's oldest mythologies, hers is a name both revered and veiled. And the flood she is said to have quelled may not be just a myth at all. The legend begins with a rupture, not just of land, but of order. The heavens cracked, the axis of the world shifted, mountains collapsed, rivers spilled from their beds and swept across the earth. According to the ancient text, Huainanzi, the blue sky split apart, unleashing storms and fire. The yellow river surged like a serpent freed from its cage. Civilization, if it existed, was reduced to islands of survival in a sea of chaos. And amid the devastation, Nuwa rose. Often depicted with the upper body of a woman and the coiled tail of a dragon or serpent, Nuwa is no ordinary deity. She does not command armies. She does not issue decrees. She repairs. She kneels by the shattered sky, melting 5 colored stones into a radiant paste, and patches the celestial dome with her hands. Then she slays a great turtle, using its legs to prop up the corners of the world, restoring balance where once there had only been collapse. It is a beautiful story, symbolic, poetic, timeless. But what if it holds fragments of truth? In recent decades, archaeologists and geologists have unearthed evidence of massive prehistoric flooding in the Yellow River Basin. Sediment layers tell of water rising with unimaginable force, reshaping landscapes, burying early settlements beneath thick layers of silt. One particularly significant find came in 2016, when a team of scientists identified signs of a massive flood around 1920 BCE near the site of Jishi Gorge. The force of the water would have destroyed everything in its path. Was this the great flood of Chinese memory? Traditional historiography tells us of another flood, more linear, less cosmic. The flood tamed by Yu the Great, founder of the Xia dynasty. In this version, passed down through Shiji and later Confucian texts, the flood is not ended by divine repair, but by human engineering. Yu dredges rivers, channels water, and earns his mandate through labor, not legend. But these two narratives, Nua's divine repair and Yu's technical triumph, are not necessarily contradictory. Some scholars believe they represent layers of a much older oral tradition, with Nua embodying the primal forces of restoration, and Yu symbolizing the social order that followed. What then is being remembered? A myth of origin? A natural disaster elevated to mythic scale? Or something else? The figure of Nua complicates the picture. Her serpentine body links her to a global archetype, the dragon goddess, the sky serpent, the creator from the deep. Similar beings appear in Sumerian, Mesoamerican, and South Asian traditions, always linked to floods, to creation, to repair. Is this coincidence, or the residue of a shared prehistoric experience? Some fringe theorists propose a forbidden history, a civilization before the dynasties, one advanced in ways we do not yet comprehend. They point to megalithic remnants in remote parts of China, to ancient astronomical alignments in early stone circles, and to mysterious artifacts that do not fit established timelines. Could Nua's legend be a compressed memory of this forgotten age? A memory of a cataclysm that erased nearly everything, but left behind the story of one who tried to hold the sky together. Others take a more esoteric view. In Taoist and early alchemical texts, Nua is sometimes linked to the balance of yin and yang, the fusion of elements, the alchemical marriage of heaven and earth. The 5 colored stones she uses to repair the sky may not be literal minerals, but symbolic representations of the wuxing, the 5 phases: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Was the act of mending the sky a metaphor for restoring cosmic harmony after a devastating age of imbalance? And what of the silence that surrounds her? Unlike other foundational myths, those of Pangu, Fuxi, or Yu, Nua's story was, for centuries, sidelined. Her name appears in early Taoist texts and mythical genealogies, but rarely in official dynastic records. Was her role minimized because of her gender, or because her story conflicted with the orderly succession of rulers that Confucian scholars sought to preserve? Even now, excavations at sites like Sanxingdui and Jinsha, far from the central plains of Chinese civilization, reveal iconography that echoes Nua's form. Serpentine beings with wide eyes and ornate headdresses, figures whose meaning remains undeciphered. Are these depictions of Nua, origin of another, older being from which she later emerged? Whatever the truth, the myth of Nua continues to pulse beneath the surface of China's ancient memory. Half history, half cosmic dream. Was she a goddess? A priestess queen from a vanished civilization? A personified force of nature, remembered through stone and story? And if we could walk the floodplains where the rivers once rose, if we could listen to the soil where the sky once cracked, what forgotten truths might still be echoing? Beneath the waters, beneath the myths, waiting to be uncovered. Somewhere in the stillness of an ancient study, a scholar sits beside a candle's flicker, arranging slender stalks of yarrow on a silk mat. A silence falls as he contemplates a series of broken and unbroken lines, 6 in total, stacked into a quiet tower. To the untrained eye, it might look like a pattern without meaning. But for those initiated into its logic, this symbol, this hexagram, opens a doorway into something deeper. The I Ching, the Book of Changes, one of the oldest and most enigmatic texts in human history. The I Ching has served as oracle, philosophy, and cosmology for over 3,000 years. Its wisdom has guided emperors and poets, monks, and strategists. And yet, for all its influence, the I Ching remains wrapped in mystery. What is it, really? A tool for divination? A philosophical framework? Or something more profound, perhaps even a coded transmission of ancient knowledge? At its surface, The I Ching is a book of symbols, 64 hexagrams made from combinations of solid and broken lines, each accompanied by a cryptic passage of text. The lines represent yin and yang, the primal duality of Chinese cosmology, dark and light, passive and active, feminine and masculine, earth and heaven. The hexagrams are read as snapshots of transformation, moments caught in the endless dance of change that shapes all things. But this is only the beginning. According to tradition, the origins of the I Ching stretch back to the legendary Fu Shi, a mythical ruler said to have lived in a time before the earliest recorded dynasties. He is credited with discovering the trigrams, 3-line figures that later became the building blocks of the full hexagrams. Some legends say he derived these patterns from observing the markings on the shell of a turtle or the veins of a dragon horse that emerged from the Yellow River. What knowledge could be hidden in such symbols? Later generations, including King Wen of Zhou and Confucius himself, expanded and annotated the text. They added layers of interpretation, commentary, and moral guidance. But the hexagrams themselves remained constant, as if they were older than language, older than history. The structure of the I Ching is mathematical. Each of the 64 hexagrams is made from 6 lines, each either broken, yin, or unbroken, yang, resulting in 2 to the power of 6 combinations, precisely 64. These numbers, some scholars argue, reflect a binary code, an ancient system of digital logic predating Western computing by millennia. The German mathematician and philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, a pioneer of binary mathematics, was so struck by the resemblance that he studied the I Ching in the 18th century and believed it revealed a universal truth of logic and language. Was the I Ching an early binary computer encoded in symbolic form? Others see within it the seeds of quantum thinking, the idea that reality is not fixed, but constantly shifting according to patterns that can be anticipated but never fully predicted. Each hexagram represents a phase in a cycle, an archetype of change. But more intriguingly, each also has a changing line, a point of instability that transforms one hexagram into another. Nothing is static, all is motion. Could this be more than a poetic metaphor? Some researchers have speculated that the I Ching encodes knowledge of natural cycles, of planetary movements, seasonal rhythms, or even the structure of DNA. Indeed, the 64 hexagrams correspond intriguingly to the 64 codons in the genetic code. Each codon in DNA is made up of 3 base pairs, just as each hexagram is built from 2 trigrams of 3 lines each. Is this coincidence, or evidence of a forgotten understanding of life's underlying order? Still others believe the text served a deeper spiritual function. Taoist sages saw the I Ching not just as a book to be read, but as a mirror for the self. Each hexagram a reflection of the moment, of one's energy, one's path, one's alignment with the Tao. By casting the hexagrams using yarrow stalks or coins, the practitioner is said to access a hidden correspondence between inner state and outer event. The answer given is not arbitrary. It is the present moment, made visible through symbol. But this raises an unsettling question. How could a randomly cast hexagram speak so clearly to one's life, one's doubts, one's decisions? Some propose that the I Ching taps into a deep synchrony, what Carl Jung called synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence of outer events and inner truths. Perhaps the I Ching is not predicting the future, but aligning us with the present. Perhaps it speaks in a language we have only just begun to remember. The book itself, with its austere lines and sparse words, invites reflection. It resists easy answers. Its wisdom is not linear, but circular, more like music than philosophy, more like weather than law. And yet, one cannot help but wonder. Was the I Ching designed merely for ethical guidance and philosophical reflection? Or was it a vessel, an ancient container for a form of pattern recognition that transcends time? A key to interpreting not only human behavior, but the hidden structure of the universe. Its origins remain uncertain, its authors mostly unknown, its depth immeasurable. What truths lie beneath the hexagrams? What ancient eyes first saw the world in yin and yang, change and stillness, code and silence? And if the I Ching is a message, who or what was it written for? In the quiet alcoves of ancient temples and the faded pages of bamboo scrolls, 12 animals form a circle, eternally chasing one another through time. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, pig. Each carries a personality, a story, a set of cosmological meanings. Together, they make up the Chinese zodiac, Shengxiao, a system of timekeeping and identity that has shaped calendars, rituals, and destinies for over 2 millennia. But behind the familiar imagery lies something far more intricate, a deeper puzzle, one whose origins, purpose, and hidden meanings may point to truths long forgotten. The earliest surviving references to the 12-animal cycle appear in texts from the Han Dynasty, around the 2nd century BCE. Yet the system itself likely predates these records. Carved into ancient bones and bronze vessels are hints of an even older cosmology, one in which animals, stars, and seasons were linked in a fluid, symbolic network. Each zodiac animal corresponds not just to a year, but to a month, a day, even an hour, forming a nested cycle within the larger framework of Chinese timekeeping. These cycles are further intertwined with the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, and the dual forces of yin and yang. In total, they create a 60-year cycle known as the sexagenary cycle, a time matrix of astonishing complexity and precision. But why these 12 animals? And why in this particular order? Legend says the Jade Emperor, ruler of the heavens, held a great race to determine which animals would appear in the zodiac. The clever rat rode the back of the ox to cross the river and leapt ahead at the last moment, securing first place. The noble tiger, the elegant rabbit, the mighty dragon. They all followed, each claiming their position in the celestial cycle. It is a charming tale. But could it be a coded story, one preserving knowledge that once guided navigation, agriculture, or astronomy? Some researchers have proposed that the zodiac functions as an ancient star map. Each animal, they suggest, corresponds to a constellation or group of stars in the night sky. The rat, for instance, is associated with the winter solstice and the northern direction, aligned with the Ziwei star or Polaris. The horse, placed in opposition, is linked to the summer solstice and the south. In this way, the entire zodiac may represent not a race on Earth, but the movement of celestial bodies above. Others point to possible links with shamanic traditions from China's tribal past. The 12 animals may have originally been totems, embodied spirits, or ancestral guides. Their sequence, in this view, could encode seasonal migrations, ritual calendars, or survival patterns etched into memory through symbolic form. Still others have noticed oddities, anomalies that challenge the conventional narrative. Why, for instance, is the dragon included? It is the only mythical creature in the zodiac, unlike the others which are drawn from the natural world. Was it once a symbol for a forgotten celestial phenomenon? Perhaps a comet, or an astronomical alignment of powerful significance? In early Chinese iconography, dragons often coil around stars or mountains, as if pointing to the heavens rather than the earth. And what of the cat? Many versions of the zodiac story include a 13th animal, the cat, who was tricked by the rat, and missed the race. The cat's exclusion has been interpreted as mythological explanation, but it raises a deeper question. Was the zodiac originally composed of 13 animals? Some ancient lunar calendars, both in China and elsewhere, were structured around 13 months. Could the zodiac then reflect a shift in calendar systems, one that left traces behind in story, but not in structure? Even the relationship between the animals and human behavior invites curiosity. In Chinese metaphysics, each person is born under a specific animal sign, believed to influence not only personality, but fate. Yet these traits are often broad, suggestive more of archetypes than fixed descriptions. The rooster is proud, the pig is generous, the monkey is clever. But are these qualities simply psychological metaphors? Or do they echo something deeper, like roles in a cosmic drama we've forgotten how to read? There are also recurring symbolic pairings: rat and horse, ox and goat, tiger and monkey. Each pair represents an axis in the zodiac wheel, complementary opposites, like yin and yang. These opposing signs are said to be in conflict or harmony, depending on the alignment of one's birth and the movement of the stars. Could this binary structure reflect a deeper understanding of polarity and balance, not unlike the hexagrams of the I Ching? In temples across East Asia, statues of the 12 zodiac animals guard entrances, circle altars, and decorate sacred spaces. Often, they are placed in positions mirroring the heavens, carefully arranged by geomancers and monks to reflect the flow of qi. In this way, the zodiac becomes more than a cultural curiosity. It becomes a mechanism, a tuning fork for the energies of space and time. Modern astrologers still use the system to predict compatibility, fortune, and key years of change. But for those who listen more closely, the zodiac may offer something far older and more profound, a vestige of how ancient China mapped not only the stars above, but the invisible rhythms that flow through all things. Was the Chinese zodiac just a calendar or a cipher? What were its creators truly measuring? And if the animals speak not only of the seasons, but of the soul, what forgotten knowledge might still be hiding in the quiet turn of the wheel? In the distant mists of antiquity, where history fades into legend, one figure stands at the threshold of myth and civilization: the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi. Revered as a cultural hero, a unifier of tribes, and the mythical progenitor of Chinese civilization, Huangdi is said to have ruled around 2697 BCE. But among the many stories that surround his life, his battles, his inventions, his spiritual revelations, one tale hovers quietly at the edge of plausibility: the story of his flying chariot. According to ancient texts, particularly the Biopuzi, a Taoist compilation from the 4th century CE, the Yellow Emperor ascended into the sky aboard a dragon-shaped chariot that soared into the heavens. Witnesses reportedly saw him rise from Mount Kunlun, a sacred peak long associated with the divine and the cosmic axis. With banners waving and wind howling, the emperor did not die as mortals do. He vanished into the clouds, leaving behind only silence and mystery. At first glance, this might seem like mere myth, another poetic metaphor for transcendence. But what exactly was this flying chariot? Was it purely symbolic, or does it hint at something else? Something technological, astronomical, or even otherworldly? Descriptions of the chariot are sparse but striking. In Taoist texts and imperial chronicles, it is described as moving without touching the earth, propelled by unseen forces, guided by celestial rhythms. Some sources describe the vehicle as metallic, with wheels that did not turn, and a radiant aura that surrounded it in flight. Was this just poetic language, or the residue of a real, forgotten technology? Throughout history, similar motifs appear in other ancient cultures. In Indian Vedic texts, vimanas are flying palaces or chariots used by gods and sages. In Sumerian myths, the gods descend in winged discs. Mesoamerican codices speak of skyborne deities traveling in vessels of light. Could Huangdi's chariot be part of this global pattern, a shared memory refracted through culture and time? Mainstream historians interpret the tale as a metaphor for apotheosis, Huangdi ascending to the realm of the immortals, a common theme in Taoist tradition. In this view, the chariot is symbolic of spiritual attainment, not a literal machine, but a vision of the soul transcending the world. Yet, the story persists with strange consistency. In some versions, the Yellow Emperor does not ascend alone. He is accompanied by attendants, sages, and devices of mysterious function. Bronze instruments that track the stars, mirrors that reflect not light, but fate. These objects, like the chariot itself, blur the boundary between ritual and machinery. In the Huainanzi, a Han-era philosophical text, the Yellow Emperor is credited with inventing a number of technological wonders: the compass, astronomical instruments, and even early forms of medicine and music. One passage refers to a mechanical carriage that could travel great distances without horses, driven instead by the alignment of the stars. Are these inventions purely legendary? Or did Huangdi represent a cultural memory of a people, or a person, who possessed knowledge far beyond their time? Some have drawn attention to the setting of his departure, Mount Kunlun. Often regarded in Chinese cosmology as the Axis Mundi, the world's spiritual center, Kunlun is not just a mountain, but a symbolic bridge between realms. It appears repeatedly in mythology as the dwelling place of deities, immortals, and travelers between worlds. That Huangdi's chariot launches from this sacred peak is perhaps no accident. Was it chosen as a poetic backdrop, or a literal launching ground? More speculative thinkers have suggested that the flying chariot represents contact with advanced technology, possibly even extraterrestrial. The consistency of the sky vehicle motif across ancient civilizations has led some to question whether ancient peoples had fleeting encounters with technologies or intelligences beyond their understanding, experiences later enshrined as myth. While such ideas remain controversial, they reflect a growing curiosity about the possibility that not all ancient myths are mere invention. Some may be encoded memory, accounts of phenomena real, but not yet explained. Of course, it is also possible that the flying chariot was a product of internal experience, an early form of visionary mysticism. Taoist meditation practices often describe flight, transformation, and ascension. Perhaps Huangdi's flight was not outward, but inward. His chariot, a symbol of the spirit rising beyond the limits of the physical world. But then again, why such precise descriptions? Why such mechanical imagery? And why do so many ancient stories, across continents and cultures, speak of beings who ride the skies? If the Yellow Emperor truly existed, his rule marks the twilight before history, a time not yet recorded in stone, but passed from voice to voice, from fire to fire. What truths were captured in those tales? What was forgotten? What was preserved? And what was only half remembered, etched into story so it might endure? Today, the legend of Huangdi's flying chariot is rarely mentioned in formal histories. It lives in the margins, in fragments of Taoist scripture, in lines of poetry, in the echoes of an age when the boundary between myth and memory had not yet hardened. So we ask, quietly, was Huangdi's flight a dream of immortality? A lost technology, now reduced to metaphor? Or a moment of contact with something older, stranger, and still unexplained? And if such a chariot once rose into the sky from Mount Kunlun, might its trail still shimmer somewhere above the clouds, waiting for us to remember how to see it? In the dim light of dawn, A fleet of ships once rose from the misted harbors of Nanjing. Masts like forest canopies, hulls the size of modern skyscrapers, sails catching wind from the East China Sea. These were not warships, nor merchant vessels alone. They were emissaries of an empire, carved from timber and ambition. At their helm stood one of the most enigmatic figures in maritime history, Admiral Zheng He. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng He led 7 epic voyages across the known world. His fleets, sometimes numbering over 300 ships and 27,000 men, traveled from Southeast Asia to the coasts of India, Arabia, and East Africa. They brought gifts, gathered tribute, exchanged goods, and recorded cultures. Their presence was overwhelming, their impact global. But then, just as suddenly as they rose, these voyages ceased. The ships were recalled, the records redacted. The shipyards fell silent, and the question lingers still. Why? Zheng He was born into a Muslim family in Yunnan and captured by Ming forces as a boy. Castrated and trained in court service, he rose to power under the Yongle Emperor, a ruler obsessed with prestige, legitimacy, and projecting Chinese influence far beyond the Great Wall. Under his command, Zheng He was given unprecedented authority to take Chinese might to the seas. The treasure ships, or Baochuan, were said to be marvels of engineering, some stretching over 130 meters long, dwarfing anything in Europe at the time. Carried aboard were porcelain, silk, lacquerware, jade, and bronze statues. But the cargo wasn't just material. The fleet carried ideas, maps, medicine, astronomical charts, giant stone tablets inscribed in multiple languages, proclaiming friendship and cultural exchange. And yet, by the time Zheng He returned from his final voyage, the political winds in Beijing had shifted. The Yongle Emperor was dead. His successors were less interested in expansion and more concerned with internal stability, border threats, and the costs of grandeur. Soon after, imperial edicts ordered the end of all major overseas voyages. The massive shipyards were dismantled. Construction of large ships was banned. Maritime records were destroyed. China, once master of the sea, turned inward. But why destroy the records? Some scholars see the end of the voyages as a rational decision, an effort to redirect resources to defend against Mongol threats or to restore Confucian orthodoxy after the bold experiments of the Yongle court. Others point to factional politics at the Ming court. The scholar bureaucrats, rooted in Confucian values, saw little benefit in distant expeditions. To them, China was already the center of civilization. Seeking validation from barbarians beyond the seas was not just wasteful, it was beneath them. Still, something about the abruptness, the scale of erasure, raises unsettling questions. Why go to such lengths not only to end the voyages, but to erase their memory? What, exactly, was brought back? Some believe Zheng He may have reached lands far beyond the official records. There are legends, unconfirmed and often contested, of Chinese shipwrecks along the American coast, or of artifacts found in Africa predating European contact by decades. Some maps, like the controversial Piri Race map or the Shanghai Yudi Quantu, have been interpreted by fringe theorists as containing elements that might trace back to Ming navigators. Did Zheng He's fleets reach shores that official history dared not include? Others speculate that Zheng He uncovered information or technologies that challenged the philosophical order of the Ming court. Ancient relics, forbidden texts, alternate histories. Could it be that the voyages opened not just trade routes, but questions the court wasn't ready or willing to face? Then there are those who suggest an even quieter reason. Perhaps the voyages weren't ended because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. If Zheng He's expeditions created relationships, established networks, or open doorways that the Ming elite feared would loosen their grip on cultural identity. It would explain the need not just to halt the missions, but to forget them entirely. And yet, not everything was lost. In scattered records, inscriptions, private journals, oral histories along the coasts of Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and East Africa, the presence of Zheng He lingers. Local traditions in places like Malacca, Galeh, and Lamu recall a great Chinese admiral who arrived not as a conqueror, but as a diplomat, a bearer of gifts. Stone tablets from his voyages still stand in places as distant as India, engraved in Chinese, Persian, and Tamil. They offer brief glimpses of the world he touched. But the fleet itself, its logs, its maps, its blueprints, remains hidden. Some believe those documents were secreted away before the purges, buried in monastery vaults, sealed in mountain archives, lost in shipwrecks beneath the sea. Perhaps they still wait, waterlogged and silent, in the depths off the Malabar coast, or tucked into forgotten drawers in some remote temple. Was Zheng He a symbol of what China could have become? A global maritime power centuries before Europe took to the oceans? Or was he a warning of what happens when a civilization dares to look too far beyond the horizon? And if one day the missing logs of the treasure fleet were to resurface, what stories might they tell? Of lost lands? Of forgotten knowledge? Of a world that briefly opened its arms, before closing them once again, leaving only waves and silence, and the fading wake of ships that vanished into mystery? In the stillness of ancient burial chambers, beneath layers of earth and time, archaeologists have uncovered something that should not have survived. Fragments of cloth, delicate, shimmering, impossibly fine. Threads so slender they defy belief. Woven not from wool or flax, but from the filament of an insect. Silk. These remnants, found in Neolithic sites like Jiahu and Chenshuanyang, date back as far as 6,000 years. Thousands of years before Egypt's pyramids, before Babylon's walls, before writing had fully taken shape. Long before the Silk Road wound its way across deserts and empires, the Chinese were already mastering the secrets of the silkworm. But how? The mystery of silk is not just in its luster or luxury, but in the sheer improbability of its invention. Silk does not reveal itself easily. The fibers are hidden inside cocoons spun by the Bombyx mori, a moth species that, curiously, no longer exists in the wild. The process of extracting usable thread requires boiling the cocoon to prevent the moth from emerging, then unraveling a single filament, sometimes over a kilometer in length. It must then be carefully reeled, dyed, woven, and softened. This is not something stumbled upon by accident. It is the product of observation, patience, or knowledge passed down from an unknown source. According to legend, silk was first discovered by Lei Zhu, the wife of the Yellow Emperor. One version tells of her sipping tea beneath a mulberry tree when a cocoon fell into her cup. As she tried to remove it, it began to unravel, revealing a gleaming thread. Intrigued, she began to experiment. The tale is poetic, but its imagery is precise. Mulberry leaves, boiling water, reeling silk. Could this myth be a cloaked memory of a much older practice, encoded in story so it might survive? What we do know is that by the time of the Shang dynasty, silk production was already refined and widespread. The earliest Chinese characters for silk, sai, appear on oracle bones, etched with reverence. Silk became more than a fabric. It was used in ritual, in writing, even as currency. By the Zhou dynasty, silk production was tightly controlled. Knowledge of its creation became a state secret, guarded with the utmost severity. But what were they protecting? Silkworms are fragile creatures. The domesticated Bombyx mori cannot survive without human care. It cannot fly, cannot feed itself. It is entirely dependent on humans, a life form seemingly designed for one purpose: to make silk. Was it the result of selective breeding over generations? Or, as some have quietly speculated, a gift of genetic engineering from a culture we do not fully understand? Some have pointed to early Taoist texts that describe the silkworm as a celestial being, its thread as the line connecting heaven and earth. Others note the appearance of silk in ancient tombs, alongside jade and bronze, suggesting it held spiritual value, not just material worth. In certain cosmological diagrams, the silkworm's cocoon mirrors the shape of the cosmos, a sphere from which transformation and light emerge. Could silk have originally been seen not as cloth, but as a conduit, a thread between realms? In more speculative circles, some researchers have explored the idea that silk may have origins even older than China. Traces of silk have been discovered in ancient Egyptian tombs and early European burials, long before any direct contact with China was supposed to have occurred. Were these threads brought along secret trade routes we have not yet mapped? Or were there parallel inventions of silk-like materials in other lost cultures, now buried and forgotten? And what of the silk books? In 1973, at the Mawangdui tombs in Hunan province, archaeologists discovered ancient texts written not on bamboo or paper, but on silk. These manuscripts, over 2,000 years old, contained Taoist philosophy, medical treatises, and astronomical records. The silk was so finely woven that it could be rolled, folded, even stitched. Why use such an exquisite and difficult medium for texts meant to be hidden in the grave? Perhaps it was more than luxury. Perhaps silk, imbued with symbolic power, was believed to preserve knowledge beyond death. To this day, no one fully understands how the technology of silk appeared so suddenly, so early, and so fully formed in ancient China. There are no gradual steps, no crude prototypes, just mastery. Sericulture, raising silkworms for thread, was already institutionalized by the time it enters the historical record. Was there a missing phase in human history? An era of knowledge and craftsmanship erased by time, remembered only in myths and fibers? Or was silk a sacred legacy, handed down not by invention, but by initiation? The more we unravel the story of silk, the more elusive it becomes. What inspired the first weaver to spin light from a cocoon? What secrets were carried in those shimmering threads, across centuries, across empires, across the veil of history? And as we trace the path of silk from tomb to temple, from legend to loom, might we one day pull the final thread and find not just fabric, but forgotten knowledge, woven quietly into the cloth of the ancient world? Beneath the waters of the Yangtze River, where the currents flow slow and deep near the ancient city of Chongqing, lies a stone ridge that has silently recorded history for over a millennium. Baiheliang, White Crane Ridge, is no ordinary stretch of riverbed. It is a living chronicle, a submerged tablet etched with the past, revealing itself only in times of drought and low tide. Carved into its surface are delicate fish, fluid calligraphy, and, most curious of all, symbols that defy conventional classification. Ancient markings, strange hieroglyphs. A code carved into stone, exposed only when the river lowers its voice. For over 1,200 years, scholars, monks, and officials came to this ridge to measure the waterline, to leave behind inscriptions of flood levels, poems, and prayers for the harmony between man and nature. The earliest known carvings date back to the Tang dynasty. Among them are lines of classical Chinese, each character bearing witness to the river's rise and fall, season after season, dynasty after dynasty. But not all the inscriptions are as they seem. Alongside the recognizable texts are symbols that do not belong to any known script. Angular lines, spiraling motifs, clusters of markings that seem more at home in prehistoric art than imperial record-keeping. Some are so worn by centuries of rushing water that their full shape is difficult to discern, yet their presence is unmistakable. They are not random scratches. They have form, they repeat, and they remain untranslated. What are these symbols doing among the poetry of emperors and the hydrological data of court scribes? Mainstream historians suggest that these unusual carvings may predate the Tang dynasty inscriptions, possibly remnants of even earlier river-watching traditions. The Baiheliang Ridge, after all, is one of the oldest known hydrological survey sites in the world. It is plausible that early inhabitants, perhaps as far back as the Han or even the pre-Qin era, marked the rock with signs meant to indicate river behavior, celestial events, or spiritual omens. But no definitive explanation has been reached. Some believe these symbols may have come from a lost writing system, one that was used briefly and forgotten, or deliberately suppressed. Could it be an early proto-script, preceding the standardization of Chinese characters? Or a regional variant developed by a forgotten culture of the Upper Yangtze? Others have noted their stylistic similarity to pictographs found in southern China's Neolithic sites, symbols etched on jade, pottery, and stone that predate written Chinese language by thousands of years. Could Baiheliang preserve the final echo of a symbolic system that once bridged the worlds of ritual and nature? A system no longer spoken of, but still carved into stone for those who knew how to read the river. The Baiheliang carvings are especially enigmatic because of their liminal nature. For most of the year, they lie beneath meters of muddy water. Only during times of extreme drought or intentional draining do they reveal themselves, like a whisper from beneath the surface. In this way, they mirror the messages they carry. Records of absence, of exposure, of imbalance between heaven and earth. And among these messages, the presence of the unknown symbols is even more haunting. In recent years, the creation of the Three Gorges Dam permanently submerged the site, threatening to hide the inscriptions forever. In response, a remarkable engineering project was undertaken. A vast underwater museum built to preserve and display the Baiheliang Ridge beneath crystal-clear, climate-controlled waters. Visitors can now walk above the ridge on glass floors, peering down at the ancient characters, the fish motifs, the drought lines, and the symbols that no one can explain. What remains particularly curious is the location of some of these mysterious carvings. They often appear in places just slightly removed from the main inscriptions, on higher ledges or deeper grooves, as if intentionally set apart. Were they meant to be private messages, sacred markings not meant for all eyes? Or were they part of a tradition that simply faded as writing became more formalized and standardized? A few researchers have suggested that these symbols may not represent language at all, but something more abstract: mathematical codes, astronomical diagrams, or energy patterns tied to Taoist cosmology. In this interpretation, Baiheliang becomes more than a natural gauge. It becomes a spiritual instrument, calibrated not only to the flow of water, but to the movement of time, balance, and fate. Others, more speculative still, have proposed that the ridge was once a ceremonial site, and the strange symbols part of a liturgical language, used not to communicate across time, but with forces beyond the visible world. The fact that these markings are only visible during the river's lowest ebb lends an uncanny weight to the theory. As if the river itself guards the message, revealing it only when the heavens allow. In the quiet corridors of the underwater museum, where light refracts through still water and ancient stone, visitors pause to stare at these undeciphered signs, trying to see in them some familiar shape, some echo of meaning. But the stone offers no answers, only silence. Who carved these symbols? What did they hope to preserve? And why did they choose a place that would remain hidden for most of time, revealing itself only in rare, liminal moments, like a breath between worlds? Perhaps the answers lie not just in the inscriptions themselves, but in the rhythm of the river, in the flow of knowledge lost and revealed, and in the quiet persistence of stone, waiting patiently beneath the water for the right eyes to return. As the early morning mist clings to the jade-colored mountains of China, their contours take on a strange vitality. Ridges that twist like serpents, peaks that rise like breath held in stillness. To the trained eye of an ancient geomancer, these landscapes are not merely natural formations, but living structures, arteries of energy flowing through the land, pulsing beneath the surface like veins under skin. They are known as Longmai, the dragon veins, invisible to most, yet mapped with precision by generations of feng shui masters. These so-called veins form the energetic backbone of China's terrain. According to tradition, they carry qi, the vital life force that animates not only the body, but the earth itself. Where the veins converge, energy gathers. Where they are blocked, disharmony follows. And where they are wounded, calamity may not be far behind. This idea forms the foundation of feng shui, a complex art and science whose origins stretch back thousands of years, long before the term became synonymous with furniture arrangement or interior design. In its original form, feng shui was a geomantic system, an attempt to read the patterns of the world itself, to align buildings, tombs, and cities with the currents of heaven and earth. But could there be more to this tradition than ancient belief? The earliest records of feng shui appear in the Zhou Li, or Rites of Zhou, dating back to the first millennium BCE. But many believe its principles are older still, rooted in shamanic traditions that predate written history. Early Chinese shamans, known as Wu, would walk the land barefoot, sensing energy flows through body and breath, guided by stars above and earth below. What they sensed, later masters attempted to map. Over time, these intuitive paths became codified into diagrams and charts. Compasses were constructed, not to point north, but to align with energy fields. The Luopan, or feng shui compass, contains concentric rings filled with characters, numbers, and symbols, used to locate not magnetic direction, but spiritual harmony. And beneath it all lies the idea of the dragon veins, the unseen network through which the earth breathes. In some interpretations, the dragon veins correspond to geological fault lines, magnetic anomalies, or subterranean water channels. Others see them as akin to ley lines, global energy paths believed by some to connect sacred sites across continents. Like the British Stonehenge or Peru's Nazca lines, many ancient Chinese temples, imperial palaces, and royal tombs are located at the convergence of these energetic pathways. Coincidence? Or was this deliberate placement, guided by knowledge now largely forgotten? The Forbidden City, for example, was laid out not merely for political power, but geomantic precision. Its position relative to the surrounding mountains and rivers was chosen with care, designed to capture the benevolent flow of qi through the central axis of the empire. The same is said of the Ming tombs, nestled in a valley shaped like a reclining dragon. Even modern Beijing sits upon what geomancers call a major node of intersecting dragon veins. Could this geomantic sensitivity be more than superstition? Recent studies have examined correlations between ancient feng shui maps and areas of low seismic activity, consistent agricultural fertility, or high biodiversity. Some researchers suggest that feng shui may preserve an encoded understanding of environmental balance, passed down through metaphor and myth, rather than scientific terminology. Was it, in essence, an early environmental science, one that merged spiritual and ecological awareness? But there are darker tales too. In some dynasties, rival powers are said to have sought control not only over armies and taxes, but over the very energy of the land. Stories tell of feng shui assassins, masters sent to redirect dragon veins by building dams, altering river paths, or placing cursed monuments on strategic ridges. The goal, to wound the enemy's land, and with it, their destiny. More fringe theories suggest the feng shui grid lines are part of an ancient global matrix, perhaps even one of artificial design. Some believe these grid lines align with planetary energy fields, visible only at high altitudes or during rare astronomical events. Could the dragon veins be just one regional expression of a much larger planetary structure?